morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. We are live downtown in our studios here at CBC. So wherever you're listening, thanks for joining us. You might be watching this morning as well on YouTube. So you're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app on YouTube. 14 degrees in Winnipeg this morning. Today our high is 24, but a nice sunny high for this final Friday of August. That is right. All right, we'll talk about what's coming up in the show in a moment. I'll remind you, if you need us on the morning commute, 788-3093 is where you can reach us. So let's say good morning to the team. Good morning, Travis Peterson, back on the morning crew for one day only, behind the controls of YouTube. Nice to have you back with us. Good morning to Chloe Friesen, who directs the program and will be on the air covering the commute. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi, who's behind the controls of the show as our technical producer. And Abby will be, of course, on air broadcasting the forecast today, which, as I mentioned, is sunny for Winnipeg. Let's have a quick look at some of the other major centers. Up in Thompson, mix of sun and cloud. Chance of showers late this afternoon. Risk of a thunderstorm as well with some local smoke. Your high 20 in Thompson and in Brandon. Mix of sun and cloud today, but mostly sunny this morning and a high of 24. It is time at 2 minutes to 6 to start the show officially, and that means that Matt Humphrey is here with our local news headlines. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning. One day after a Winnipeg serial killer was sentenced to life in prison for murdering 4 women, the victims' families gathered for a memorial ceremony designed to close this emotional chapter of their lives. Premier Wab Kinew spoke and sang during the ceremony. We'll hear some of that. Today he intends to go to the Prairie Green landfill to check on the search progress. We'll hear more at the bottom of the hour. And the brutal acts of Jeremy Skibitsky left even the judge who handed him a life sentence calling that punishment inadequate. Now a debate is on over how long people convicted of murdering multiple victims should have to wait before getting a chance for parole. More of that conversation at 6:30.
All right, thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
Well, one of the other conversation that is coming up out of the sentencing of Jeremy Skibitsky is, why would a convicted serial killer not be designated a dangerous offender under the law? We're going to look at the law today in the aftermath of the sentencing in Winnipeg, so stay tuned for that conversation. Also in the first hour of the show, healthcare burnout. One of the University of Toronto authors of a recent op-ed argues a major culture shift is needed in this country to protect healthcare heroes, and we're going to hear more about what was written. Stay tuned for World Report.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Dua Lipa is one of the world's great pop stars. In a Canadian exclusive, we met up in New York City to talk about how being the child of refugees shapes her art, why pop music doesn't get the respect it deserves, and how to turn a bad date into a great song.
I feel good and I want to grasp that energy.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. The world already knows what a Trump presidency looks like. And this morning it has some idea of what a Harris presidency could look like. In her first interview since securing the Democratic nomination, Kamala Harris spoke about her vision for the United States. The CBC's Katie Simpson reports.
Day one, it's going to be about, one, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy.
Vice President Kamala Harris says her top priority will be finding ways to ease the cost of living crisis, to grow the middle class, make groceries and housing more affordable. In her first major unscripted appearance, she defended the Biden administration's handling of the economy while acknowledging some Americans are hurting.
To supply American families with their basic needs, I'll say that that's good work. There's more to do.
On foreign policy, she told CNN anchor Dana Bash she'll maintain current U.S. support for Israel, despite objections from a vocal coalition of progressive voters.
But no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done.
Harris only took a few swipes at Donald Trump, dismissing his questioning of her mixed race identity.
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
And for the first time, she shared details about the historic phone call she got from Joe Biden. On the Sunday, he decided he was stepping down. She says she just made her grandnieces pancakes. They were sitting down to do a puzzle when the phone rang and he shared his announcement.
I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. And that's how I learned about it. He was very clear that he was going to support me. My first thought was not about me, to be honest with you. My first thought was about him. to be honest.
There were no major gaffes, which is exactly what the Harris campaign was hoping for. They like the direction the election is headed and have been running an extremely cautious campaign to keep it that way. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
To the Middle East now, and a warning from the UN. A failure to deliver polio vaccines would be disastrous for children not only in Gaza, but beyond. It comes ahead of a planned break in fighting in Gaza on Sunday to allow the World Health Organization to begin a vaccination campaign there. Julia Chapman has the details.
Inside Gaza, more than 1.2 million polio vaccines sit waiting to be used. They're destined for children under the age of 10. Health officials will start administering the vaccines on Sunday if fighting stops in the agreed areas. Louise Wateridge is a UN spokesperson in Gaza.
Any military operations during the time we are trying to roll out a vaccination campaign will affect our ability to deliver these vaccinations to children.
Polio has returned to Gaza after 25 years. The nearly eradicated disease has become resurgent amid mass displacement and poor sanitation. Nafeen Abu al-Jidyan's son Abdul Rahman was the first confirmed case. She told CBC News the 11-month-old has become weak and immobile. Health officials say prevention is key, especially with medical facilities badly damaged and poorly supplied. But moving supplies around the enclave is extremely dangerous. Yesterday, an American NGO carrying medical aid was targeted with an airstrike. Israel says armed assailants were trying to hijack the convoy. The charity says several transport company workers were killed. And earlier this week, Israeli forces shot a clearly marked World Food Programme vehicle. Israel says the incident happened because of a communication error. Julia Chapman, CBC News, London.
We'll get the latest look at the state of the Canadian economy with Statistics Canada tabling its second quarter GDP update. It comes less than a week from the Bank of Canada's September interest rate setting. Most analysts expect to see that economic growth continues to be modest and, in theory, is well positioned if interest rates continue to come down. The central bank's rating setting is for next Wednesday. Some of the nations most vulnerable to the effects of climate change are meeting, and so it's no surprise that the Pacific Islands Forum Leaders Meeting has been heavily focused on the topic. The United Nations Climate Report is warning the Pacific could see at least a 15-centimeter rise in sea level by 2050 if global carbon emissions go unchecked. Freelance reporter Phil Mercer has more from Sydney.
I urge Pacific Island states to make your voices heard, and heard loudly.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the Pacific is the world's most vulnerable region to the climate crisis. Leaders from 18 Pacific nations, including Australia and New Zealand, have gathered in Tonga. Rising seas, long droughts and unpredictable rainfall patterns have been a key focus. So have tropical storms.
We live with cyclones.
Sione Taufa is from a small island in Tonga and works at the University of Auckland. He worries that climate change is making cyclones more intense.
There's usually one or two that comes in for a direct hit. But nowadays we're seeing more of those Category 4, Category 5 type cyclones. So it's coming in and much more regularly.
Drinking water is another major concern. Marika Vakavola is an environmental campaigner in Fiji. She says wells are contaminated by the encroaching sea.
Water security is a big risk in terms of climate change. Most of their freshwater sources that were once good enough to be consumed is now being intruded by, salt water.
Australia's rivalry with China in the region has also been on display at the forum in Tonga. Canberra hopes a new security agreement will make it harder for Beijing to influence police forces in the Pacific. Phil Mercer for CBC News, Sydney.
A former member of the Italian Marxist-Leninist group, the Red Brigades, is under arrest in Argentina after decades on the run. Megan Williams has the details from Rome.
Before his arrest in Buenos Aires on Thursday, Leonardo Bertolazzi had spent 44 years as a fugitive, a one-time member of the far-left Red Brigades group that operated here in Italy in the 1970s and 80s, a period known as the Years of Lead, a reference to the metal in bullets. The Italian, now 74, was among those responsible for the kidnapping of a member of the Genoese ship-owning family Costa.
Il presidente della Democrazia Cristiana, Aldo Moro, è stato rapito questa mattina.
Money gained from that crime went to purchase a Rome apartment, where former Italian Prime Minister and Christian Democrat leader Aldo Moro was held before his shocking murder in 1978. Bertolazzi was sentenced here in Italy to 27 years in prison for crimes related to terrorism.
Rita Algranati, fuggita in Nicaragua.
But like a number of members of far-left terror groups, fled to South America. In 2019, one of Italy's most notorious members of a far-left terrorist group from the same era, Cesare Battisti, was arrested in Bolivia after fleeing first to France, then to Brazil. Buenos Aires police arrested Bertolazzi for the first time in 2002, but he was released a few months later and managed to receive refugee status 2 years after. Italian and Interpol police were present at his arrest this time, and the extradition process to Italy is now underway. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
One of the two doctors charged in connection with Canadian actor Matthew Perry's death is set to appear today in a U.S. federal court in Los Angeles. Dr. Mark Chavez is expected to plead guilty to conspiring to distribute the surgical anesthetic ketamine. Chavez agreed to cooperate with prosecutors as they pursue their main targets, another doctor and a woman nicknamed the Ketamine Queen. Both have pleaded not guilty and are awaiting trial. And finally, a comeback story to touch the hearts of Canadians. Jacob Wasserman is making his Paralympics debut this morning as the lone representative of Team Canada in para-rowing. You may know Wasserman as a survivor of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash in 2018. The accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. In October 22, he tried rowing for the first time. Less than 2 years later, he's representing Canada at the Games in Paris. CBC caught up with his wife, Madison Toombs Wasserman, on the streets of the French capital.
We truly have a country behind us, and we have his family here with us. His grandparents are back home, so we've been shooting little videos to send to them, and I've got messages from all the boys to send him as well. So we've got so much support behind us. Honestly, it's hard to put into words because we've dreamt about this moment for 2 years, and now here we are.
Madison says Jacob was aiming to take part in the 2028 Games in Los Angeles. It came as quite a surprise when he found out that he would be representing and competing in Paris 4 years earlier. Well, that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca, including a story this hour, a 12-year-old who has built a driveway mini-putt course. And they tell us it's a hit. Who doesn't love mini-putt? cbcnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
It is here, the last Friday in August, whether we like that or not. Getting ready to head into the long weekend. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. And it is, as I mentioned, right around 14 this morning. We'll update what the day is going to be like weather-wise in a moment. Also, this hour on the program, we're going to talk about healthcare burnout. We are talking about it in the context of an op-ed piece that has been written looking at Canada's healthcare system as staff shortages continue to be a huge issue across the country. So we'll get some analysis of what this op-ed had to say. In addition, something super fun and lovely, a fall festival celebrating African music, art, and food is going to be happening in St. Norbert, and we're going to hear from the organizer this hour, so stay tuned for that. And when the workday's over, do you turn off your devices? Do you ignore email? Well, the question is, do you have the right not to be contacted? We'll talk about new regulations that have passed. Not in Canada yet, but somewhere else in the world. You may have heard that in the news earlier this week. So stay tuned. We'll have an interview about how that actually will work in practice, a regulation around not being contacted. Right now, though, let's go to Matt Humphrey, who's in with our headlines. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning. Now that their loved one's killer is behind bars, families of the victims of Jeremy Skibitsky are hoping to close this chapter of their lives. At the Forks last night, we saw a memorial ceremony paying tribute to the 4 women who were killed. Among the singers and speakers was Premier Wab Kinew, who sang a Lakota song of remembrance. We also heard from one of the key people in Canada working to end violence against missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We'll hear more details at 6:30. And the city of Winnipeg is in the process of renaming Air Canada Window Park along Portage Avenue, but one of the people in charge of the renaming, who's calling for name suggestions from the public, says the vast majority of the submissions received are negative and racist. We'll hear more at the bottom of the hour.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
6:12 a.m. is the time right now. So how's the last day of August going to look, Abby?
It's going to be sunny in most regions. Currently, Winnipeg, it's clear outside, 14 degrees. We're expecting sunny conditions with some breeze to come with that throughout today. We're aiming for a high of 24, though it's still going to be feeling a bit humid out there. And then for tonight, we'll see more clear skies. Some clouds will roll in later, and some light breeze would continue. In other regions up north, we're hearing about this air quality advisory, which is in effect due to smoke in the northern part of the province. Thompson is actually impacted by that, 12 degrees there. Foggy in Churchill at 9, and then down south from Brandon all the way down to Morris, we're seeing temperatures between 10 and 14 degrees. It will start sunny with some light breeze. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 14 degrees.
So I have to change what I'm saying because I said it two ways. I'm meaning to say it's the last Friday in August, and I keep saying it's the last day in August.
Last Friday. It's 31, Mercy. This is like one of those months that you get to take, you're responsible for every day.
Chloe's so kind that instead of coming in and going, it's not the last day of August, she just went,
It's the last Friday.
Isn't there a 31st?
That's what she asked me just now. I'm like, yes, yes, there is. It's tomorrow.
I was wondering if I had my whole weekend schedule wrong. I was missing things.
No, not missing a thing. What are you hearing about in traffic?
I got two words for you, Marcy, and this is two words that are very important on Monday, and that is school zones.
Yes.
Back in effect starting Monday. And so that's for schools in the area. You'll see the signage 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. It's 30 kilometers per hour from Monday to Friday. So that's something to keep in mind as we head into next week. And Travis actually mentioned that if you live in the West End, if you travel in the West End, it's pretty hard to get around. I've experienced this as well. But Sargent, Ellis, and Arlington all have stretches where you're losing lanes due to construction. So it's pretty slow moving. But if you're in that area, you've probably adapted real well to that. But if there are any other construction areas or if you spot anything else that is slowing you down, you can give us a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, the long weekend is almost here, and you might be looking for something fun to do before the start of fall routines begin next week. Well, on Saturday, tomorrow, the Afro Fall Fest is going on. It's a music and arts festival. It highlights local African talent. It's in its second year now, and Nosoko Badia is the festival's creative director and goes by Cozy Manos in the Afrobeat scene. And he spoke with host Faith Fundella all about the festival on Up to Speed.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing well. What about you? How are you feeling as we get to Saturday?
I'm feeling excited, feeling nervous, overall grateful.
And I mentioned it's your second year.
Yes.
Talk about what inspired you to start this in the first place.
So being an artist myself, this whole event came from an artist's perspective. And the main thing, it's a music and arts festival for Africans in Manitoba. So the main thing is really to highlight the African artists in Manitoba, both visual artists and performers as well.
When you first approached people in the first installment of this, and you said, I want to do this because it's not something that we see. I mean, what kind of reaction did you get from the artists, from people?
It was mixed because it's an artist reaching out to a fellow artist. And for them, they feel like, oh, this is just your show and you're trying to put us on kind of thing.
Right.
That was kind of the first reaction. But when the event did come about, they saw it. I'm like, oh, wow, this is actually beautiful, especially being at the St. Norbert's grounds, you know? So at first there was a bit of hesitation, but on the day of, everyone enjoyed it because it's nice to be outside too in that kind of environment. So it was, they took it nicely.
And it looks like the weather is going to be, it will cooperate.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
What can folks expect when they attend?
Yes, so you can expect the gates open at 11 a.m. However, the first event is going to be the art exhibition, which starts at 2 p.m. And that is curated by Olivia Cassie of Black Artists Winnipeg. And then the music itself starts at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. till about 9 p.m. And in between, they're going to be local vendors as well. Some vendors from St. Norbert Market themselves, St. Norbert area themselves. And food, drinks, the whole nine.
It's kind of perfect timing because just when you're starting is right after the food market there ends, right? The farmers market ends. The art. Why was it important for you to include both visual art and the music part of it? Why bring both?
Yeah, it's. I feel like it's all art, right? And it all goes together. I feel like art is it's very needed in society, and sometimes there's not a lot of attention shown towards that. And for us, it's like, okay, people come out for music regardless. However, when it comes to art exhibition, I feel like you have to be a fan of art to really come out to an art exhibition.
Yeah.
So for us, it's like, okay, we have the venue, we have the space, there's a nice indoor gallery, just display some work, and like the music will pull people in and then they see your work. So we're just kind of like, okay, a win-win. And again, we're all of one culture and we're celebrating the same thing. So it just made sense to combine both of them together.
Do you see different folks coming in the afternoon and coming at nighttime, or is it like the same people that come in the morning or the afternoon and then return?
No, it's definitely different. Like in the daytime is more of like the family, because we do have some carnival games, like some basketball stuff and whatnot. So it's usually the family in the daytime, and then in the evening time, which is when the music starts. That's when you get the evening crowd, and then they stay till the end, pretty much.
How did I know you weren't the chooser of what would be part of the art exhibit? What was that conversation like with your other creative director about what to include?
Yeah, so with that, I left that on the hands of Olivia Cassie with Black Artists Winnipeg. So for her, it was just mainly, okay, who are the good artists, but then people don't really know much about them. And, because she was there last year, so we want to get new faces in, and a mix of styles as well. So I think those were the factors that played into it.
What about for choosing the artists?
For us, it was... For me, anyways, it was more of like, how would it go sequence-wise? Like, for me, I'm thinking on the playlist, how would it sound on a playlist? How would it sound on like an album? So it was just how the flow of the show would go and who can put a good performance,
Talk about some of the names for people who might know, well, whether they know them or not. Who can people hear?
Well, obviously, if you haven't heard, Tommy Phil is going to be performing. Janet Jacobs, Santa Clara. We have Laurel Shante. We have some of my friends and also artists coming from Ontario. M and Wally West, Mozzie, they actually just arrived today. So yeah, a few names that and a lot of like new faces as well.
What are you most excited about? I mean, I'm sure it can be stressful / insert all the feelings, but what are you most excited about for this weekend?
Honestly, I just want to see everything coming together nicely, to be honest. And regardless of the numbers, I want everyone who shows up there to have a good time. And whether it's the food, whether it's the music, whether it's the art, just come here and have a good time. And that's enough satisfaction for me.
That's Nosa Gobadia, the Afro Fall Festival creative director, in conversation there with CBC's Faith Fundal. So it's on tomorrow, 11 o'clock at the St. Norbert Arts Centre. Tickets are well priced. They're $12 for general admission. You can buy tickets at afrofall.com. And we can't leave you talking about a festival that's about music without playing some music. So here is a song from Nosa. This is called We Go Day.
My spouse. Forever. The vision ain't blurry for me, oh. I'm liking the things that I see, oh. Who born this speaking for daddy, oh. I should see me, I did my own, oh. Shawty, what you did my zone, oh. I'm never gonna leave you alone, oh. Forever, wherever, no matter the weather, oh my baby, yeah. Now me and you go there, together, forever, wherever, no matter the weather, oh my baby, yeah. Now me and you go there. no matter the weather. Oh, my baby, now me and you go there.
Cozy Manos and We Go Day, and you can catch the Afrobeats Festival coming up this weekend, tomorrow at the St. Norbert Arts Center. So check it out if you want to go. This is the second year, and the proper name of the festival, the Afro Fall Fest, going on. Sampling a little Keisha there. It is mainly clear and 14 degrees in Winnipeg. The high today is going to be 24. Lots of sunshine for our Friday here in the city. Well, to serious matters next. The strain on Canada's healthcare system continues to intensify, and the well-being of healthcare workers is reaching a breaking point. A recent op-ed in the Globe and Mail highlights the severe burnout among healthcare professionals. Many are overworked, they feel undervalued, and they're leaving the profession in large numbers. Julie Maggi is with us, one of the authors of this and director of the Faculty Wellness in the Temerty Faculty of Medicine at the University of Toronto. Good morning.
Morning.
How did we get to this point?
Well, there's a number of factors that have gotten to us to this point. So one of them is that the culture of healthcare has traditionally really been a culture of self-sacrifice. So people like myself enter the field to help others, and we often do that at great personal cost. And unfortunately, this selflessness is something that sometimes has been taken advantage of and has been subtly rewarded over time. And that can be a real driver for people getting burned out.
Can I interject on that point before you move on?
Absolutely.
Taken advantage of by whom? By the systems that you work in, or by those that train in those systems, or is it the culture as well, like worker to worker, also taken advantage of?
Yeah, it's all of that, right? So, I can think of a personal example, and I think this is quite common, is that we, in healthcare, we really, we want to help the patients. That's why we entered the field. And when you remove resources and continue to remove resources, there's still an internal drive to want to help the patient. And the inability to do that can lead to a lot of moral distress. So healthcare workers are really driven to keep sacrificing and keep doing what we do in order to help our patients.
So then that just means more hours,
That's right.
more time, and also trying to constantly catch up and meet the same bar you might have with more staff, which obviously is an impossibility.
We monitor a lot of outcomes in healthcare. So we look at, as we should, patient experience, clinical care outcomes, and those are critical. But we haven't actually made it the norm to monitor the well-being of the healthcare workers. So as we're implementing and changing things, we're missing out on the impact that those implementations and changes can have on healthcare workers. And we need to start doing that so we don't inadvertently make changes that cause more stress.
Now, I interjected there to elaborate on that first point. How do we get to this point? And you're talking about the cultural self-sacrifice, obviously. What are the other factors that got us here in this country?
So other factors are that we have, one of the main, when we think about the main culprit, but who's mostly responsible for healthcare worker well-being. So we have traditionally in medicine focused on the individual. And that's slowly starting to change. And there's an understanding that the responsibility actually lies not just with an individual, but with the organizations and with the broader system. And until we kind of start to address some of those broader issues, systemic issues that are impacting, we're really going to be, constantly trying to catch up, and there's going to be more and more contribution to burnout.
Broader issues like what? Do you have an example?
So broader issues like workload and job demands. That's, something common. So until we start to address the job demands and the amount of work that we're giving people, like an individual can't address that on their own. That's something that an organization needs to look at and properly address and support the worker in the amount of work and the demands on their job before we're going to be able to see any change.
So with burnout, there's a problem of retention of healthcare workers that are already in the system. How can we start breaking that cycle to keep more people in the system if the reality is you don't have the numbers? It's like the chicken and the egg. You need the numbers of people in the system to help with the burnout and spread the work around. And while you don't have them, you're trying to keep people in the system and encourage them that things will get better. So what do you think should be done there to address that?
So that's a really important issue. So in order to address that, I mean, you're right. The system, the larger system, has a lot of issues that we're only going to be able to change over the long term. And in the short term, we have to think about what are the intrinsic factors, so factors that are meaningful internally to a person, and what are the external factors that drive people to either stay or leave. So intrinsic motivators, like things like meaning in your work, purpose, feeling valued, these things are crucial. And if those are diminished, in the course of a person's work, simply increasing the external rewards, that's not going to be helpful to retain staff. Now, when you combine poor recognition and poor pay for some healthcare workers, then you have a crisis of demoralization. And so we have to really start to look at those factors, be honest about those factors, and try to address the things that are within our sphere of control.
In terms of inclusion, the article also talks about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. How can healthcare organizations ensure that those values are genuinely embedded in their culture, that they're walking the walk, that there's a shift and it's not just a goal on paper?
Right. So, I think one of the first things that we have to do is work to promote those values of diversity and inclusion into our institutional policies and processes, because ultimately that's what starts to drive what we do in the institution. Eventually it'll change culture and things will become more authentic, but it has to first be embedded. In the meantime, we can also teach people and teach leaders in particular about how to manage things that are happening on the ground. So the evidence, as an example, tells us that we miss a lot of subtle acts of discrimination. And then when we notice them, we don't know how to manage them in a way that's collaborative and inclusive and humanizing. And so we can teach people how to do those things and to give them a sense of control and power. And those are things that can actually help, overall feel more included and more autonomous.
Julie Maggi, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's Julie Maggi outlining some of what she wrote about in an op-ed that she put together, looking at nationally at what's going on with healthcare. She wrote it for the Globe and Mail. She is Director of Faculty Wellness at the University of Toronto's Temerty Faculty of Medicine. And if you want to read more, by the way, speaking of healthcare workers, about what's happening with the votes for CUPE this week all around the province, please go to Ian Frase's latest reporting at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. At 6:30, it's misty and 14 degrees in Norway House, Cree Nation, 14 degrees and clear over downtown Winnipeg. Good morning, I'm Matt Humphrey. Songs, prayers, and ceremony at the Forks last night marked the end of another chapter in a tragic story. People gathered to pay tribute to the 4 women whose lives were stolen by a serial killer, sentenced this week. Advocate Sandra Delarond says ceremonies involving fire, water, and berries are meant to help the victims' families move forward in a good way.
Acknowledging that loss and the pain and suffering, and being here with community and sharing life and promise and hope, it will help families to take that next step. And absolutely, it's going to be difficult, but they can remember this day.
One of the speakers last night and one of the singers at the memorial was Premier Wab Canoe. He says he will visit the Prairie Green landfill today to see how the plans to search for 2 of the women's remains is coming along. Meanwhile, victims' rights groups, politicians, and even the judge are saying the sentence given to Jeremy Skibitsky this week isn't enough. The man who killed 4 women will be eligible for parole, to apply for parole, in 25 years. That's because the 4 life sentences he received must be served concurrently at the same time. Lisa Kerr is an associate law professor at Queen's University. She says the law previously allowed sentences to be served consecutively, but she says the Supreme Court struck it down because it betrayed Canada's commitment to constitutional rights, human dignity, and rehabilitation.
They understood the stakes here, and they also understood that this does not mean that we can't impose impose very severe punishment and that we can't incapacitate someone like this and keep them separate from us for the rest of his natural life.
Kerr says the chances of Skibitsky ever being granted parole are, quote, virtually non-existent, end quote. A member of a Winnipeg committee tasked with helping to decolonize public spaces says she's discouraged by the feedback she's been getting. Rihanna McKay is the co-chair of Welcoming Winnipeg. They've been asking the public to help suggest a new name for Air Canada Window Park, a new name for the park on Portage Avenue downtown. But McKay says the vast majority of the submissions they've received are negative and racist. She says public spaces used by Indigenous people should have names that better reflect them.
It's very meaningful for these members that are within that space because it's going to represent their language, who they are, their own history, and it's just an opportunity to really reflect another side of the voices that are within that area.
McKay says she's disappointed many in the public don't appear to support the reconciliation work of Welcome Winnipeg. Kamala Harris is revealing her day one priorities should she win the U.S. election. In her first interview since becoming the Democratic nominee, Harris shed new light on her proposals to govern and shared the moment she first learned Joe Biden was dropping out of the race. The CBC's Katie Simpson has your details.
Day one. Vice President Kamala Harris says her top priority will be finding ways to ease the cost of living crisis, to grow the middle class, make groceries and housing more affordable. On foreign policy, she told CNN anchor Dana Bash she'll maintain current U.S. support for Israel.
But no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done. Harris only took a few swipes at Donald Trump, dismissing his questioning of her mixed race identity.
Any same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
And for the first time, she shared details about the historic phone call she got from Joe Biden. On the Sunday, he decided he was stepping down.
I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. My first thought was not about me, to be honest with you. My first thought was about him.
There were no major gaffes, which is exactly what the Harris campaign was hoping for. They like the direction the election is headed. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
And finally, the World Health Organization says the Israeli military and Hamas have agreed to several three-day pauses in fighting in Gaza to enable children to get polio vaccinations. Juliet Touma is with the UN agency UNRWA in charge of implementing the vaccination campaign.
The first round, we're hoping to get to over 600,000 kids under the age of 10. And with polio, you need to give kids 2 doses, but 2 rounds. So we're hoping that we would also be able to have another campaign end of September.
That campaign is due to start Sunday. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
All right. Thanks very much, Matt.
Back soon.
Let's get into our regional forecast now for CBC with Abby Adiemi.
Across the regions, Manitoba will enjoy sunny and partly cloudy skies today with some breezy conditions rolling in most of the areas. We're expecting temperatures to range from 10 to 24 degrees with a chance of showers in other parts of the province. Currently 14 in Winnipeg. We're expecting sunny conditions with a high of 24. Tomorrow in Winnipeg, we're going to see sunny skies and a mix of sun and clouds with some breezy conditions. As we head west to Brandon, it is 10 degrees and clear. We're expecting this also to turn into some sunny skies as we get into the morning. We will be seeing highs near 24 and some clouds will roll in tonight. A slight chance of showers for folks in Brandon. Moving north to Thompson, 12 degrees and mostly cloudy at this time. We have that air quality advisory in effect due to wildfire smoke, and we should be seeing a mix of sun and clouds in that region. A chance of showers and thunderstorm this morning, and the highs will touch around 20 degrees. Farther north in Churchill, it is 9 and foggy. We'll see some cloudy conditions this morning. A good chance of showers that would clear by the afternoon period. Breezy and a high of 15. Down in Dauphin, 14 and mostly cloudy at this time. We're expecting the sun to make its appearance later, and then we'll see sunny conditions all through the day. Some breezy conditions from the west would come with that. The highs would be around 23. Gimli at 14 and partly cloudy at this time. The Interlake region will be seeing more of sunny conditions and light breeze and heading to a high of 24. Steinbach is clear at 12 degrees, heading to a high of 24 as well. And Morris is clear at this time, 12 degrees for the Pembina Valley region. You should be seeing a sunny day, a high of 24, It's going to be humid, and the winds will be kind of light and then shifting west later. Tonight calls for clear skies, so it's going to be a beautiful weekend. Across board, we're just expecting cloudy conditions throughout the day and a bit of breezy conditions, and we'll see highs near 24.
All right, Abby. So I missed the moment. Your hat, people can see on YouTube there, is this awesome color of orange. And now let's go to the sky photo, because it was that color, but I didn't mention it. If you're on YouTube, you saw
golden moment.
Gorgeous. It's gone now. You just see a little line
Just
of
a
it
bit
there
of
in
it
the
there.
buildings. Pretty clear sky, though, actually. So nice start to the day. But I want to actually get another photo up, because we do this rarely, but I just want everyone to see our team. There we are.
There we are.
Look, everyone has to see me all morning. If you're on YouTube, you can check out a photo of our early morning crew. Yeah. So there's Matt Humphrey, who was just on with the news. Travis Peterson, who's behind the controls of YouTube. Obviously me and Abby in there in the middle, and then Chloe, who is coming on air here.
Abby the quarterback.
Yes.
I'll be the quarterback.
be
And
the
Chloe
quarterback.
with the longest arms, so I take the selfies.
I'm the coach because I'm bossy. I know. I know. At least I can own it. All right. What's happening in the commute this morning?
Not a lot right now, but I do want to remind folks that Monday, it's coming up fast, and school zones are back in effect. So those get started Monday. So those signs that are out there, you really got to pay attention to them, because that's September. It's coming. So from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., 30K in those areas from Monday to Friday. So make sure that you are watching out for that. We're going to see a lot more little humans walking around, going to school.
Busy streets.
Busy streets. So be very safe out there. And if there is anything that is slowing you down this morning or getting in your way, you can let us know by calling our commuter line, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thank you, Chloe. Let's get into business news now with Phil DeMont, who joins us from CBC's Business Desk. Good morning.
Yeah, I went to YouTube. All I've got is 2 hours of you talking, apparently.
What's wrong with that?
I was going to say, I'm not sure I'm going to click on that.
You'll go back in the feed. You'll be able to see the photo, Phil.
Okay.
Let's talk about GDP numbers. Markets are going to be watching for this because we have new numbers coming out in Canada. What do you think they're going to tell us?
Yeah, this is not the usual knobby story where I'm kind of talking about 0.2%. This is actually me saying, I think the economic story's changed. I think these numbers will say that. Since it's Canada, we'll drop out Canada's June gross domestic product number this morning. It'll tell how the economy performed in the second quarter. Now, estimates have it 2.2% April to June. If that's right, it's the fastest growing Canadian quarter economically in 2 years. But here's where I'm going with this. A year ago, 18 months ago, this would have been a concern. Investors would have looked at the higher growth numbers and went, oh, we're going to get inflation, so that means we're going to get higher interest rates, and then they would have, sold stocks or held their head in their hands. That story's changed. Canada's estimated Q2 inflation 2.4%. That's well within the 1% to 3% target band set by the Bank of Canada. I always talk about 2%, but it's actually a band, and they're kind of okay with it being in that range. The worry now is flipped. It's too slow GDP growth, not a looming burst of inflation. And in fact, it's kind of been killed up here when you've seen that change in the States. Investors, once worried about inflation, more or less have said down there, it's dead. Instead, they're cheering. Yesterday, there were revised GDP numbers, again, kind of inside baseball, but the numbers there showed the U.S. economy growing a bit faster than originally thought. Well, that was actually drove up markets, and it's a positive sentiment now. A year and a half ago, it would have been negative if you had faster economic growth, but the story's changed. It's no longer about inflation. It's about whether you can get a soft landing for the economy.
To another story here, there's a growing list of companies that are dropping or at least downplaying their diversity programs. What's happening?
Yeah, leaked memo Ford says it's quote-unquote taking a fresh look at what are known as DEI policies, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Shorthand for a series of policies designed to assist minorities, women, and LGBTQ employees of the workplace. Problems since the first Donald Trump presidency, more people pushing back against these policies. Various arguments for the backlash, but the main economic one tends to be supposed an advantage for some groups over others in terms of hiring and promotion. Pushback really took form of consumer boycotts. 2023, Bud Light sales got crunched after the label started a collaboration with a transgender internet influencer. They walked that back pretty quickly. Other companies, Harley-Davidson, Tractor Supply, etc., have downplayed inclusion. The problem, not having such policies actually might hurt your company in the long run. I'll pick out a number. McKinsey, the business consultancy, estimates that companies that pursue ethnic and cultural diversity in the workplace are 36% more profitable than companies that don't have these programs, partly because women are such a big portion of the workforce. So now you might want to say, okay, in this current environment, you want to downplay your diversity goals publicly, but not having any DEI programs, that risks hurting your company's returns in the long run.
I always, as a woman, I always just, even the word diverse in these conversations even like doesn't sit well with me. For everyone is just equity across the board. So the numbers that you put on it are interesting though. What will the wave of the current, to another story, political ads in the U.S. Do you think tell us about Canada's next election? Can we glean anything from that, Phil?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be more political parties finding more ways to get in front of you. We're heading into the push for the U.S. election. Both parties are going to have huge ad buys. In past times, that would have meant money spent on television ads. The new world, both the Democrats and the Republicans in the U.S. are spending buckets of cash buying time on streaming services. Experts project that both parties will spend almost $11 billion on electronic advertising by the time ballots are counted November 5th. What's termed broadcast services will take up about half that buy. That's streamers like Hulu, Roku, those kind of ones. This season, the parties will spend almost 5 times the amount on streaming ads that they're spending on cable, and that world's changed. All this matters to Canada because we're likely to face a federal election in the next year or so. About more than 4 in 10 Canadians don't subscribe to cable anymore. They've cut the cord. But that doesn't mean you can avoid the annoying political ads, and especially if the U.S. election's any indication, you're going to actually be swamped by them.
What's going on in the markets?
Right now, Eurozone inflation, 3-year low. So Germany, France, UK, decent gains there. Those U.S. GDP numbers, they tend to affect Asia more than Europe. So the good numbers had Hong Kong up 1.25%, Shanghai and the Nikkei up as well. Oil up 17 cents, $76.08 a barrel. Canadian dollar, right now it's flat, 74.21 cents U.S.
All right, Phil, take care.
Thanks, Marcy.
That's Phil Demont from our business desk at CBC. 6:44 a.m. is the time right now. It's the last Friday in August as we get ready for the long weekend. Wondering if you're up early, if you're packing, and if you're leaving town to go watch some football. I know I ran into some people casually that are heading for the Labor Day Classic, and they're going to be heading off to Regina to watch the Bombers and Saskatchewan Rough Riders. It's always fun to watch the Labor Day Classic, and then maybe you're going to do the Banjo Bowl in Winnipeg too. But this year there's actually something at stake, so I think a lot more Bomber fans might even decide to make the trip because the Bombers are trying to get first spot in the West. So it's a big game on top of the fact that it's a fun rivalry also on the field. So if you're getting up early and you're planning on heading off, we'd love to hear from you, Bomber fans. Sports coming up here after 7 o'clock, so you can give us a call and let us know. 788-3205. Well, speaking of sport, the Paralympics are officially in full swing right now, and a lot of competitors are finally on their way to reaching their athletic dreams. But the road to get there, in some cases, would not have been possible without the help of specialists. Neil Reddy is a certified prosthetist and orthotist at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital in Toronto. Now, he helped develop running blades and prosthetics for Canada's Paralympians competing in Paris. And he describes the work that was involved in creating these high-end devices.
It starts at the beginning with the goals. You know, what are the goals straight up from the beginning? And then we come up with a design, like a prosthetic prescription. And, you know, from there, we're looking at the socket. That's the part that goes on the limb. And that fit just has to be just perfect. You know, so we go through a trial phase where we're testing things out with some of the Olympians, the Paralympians, and some of the hopefuls. We're able to test things out in our hospital at Holland Bloorview, but also on the track, and we're refining the technique or the socket fit or the alignment. So it's very customized, and you get to build the bond with them. We start with something that's a thermoplastic, so it's heat moldable. So when we're on the track, we're doing some running, we can say, you know what, you need a little bit more of a relief here, or how does it feel when you move through all these extra ranges of motion that you typically wouldn't see an everyday prosthesis for someone running. It's a labor of love, really, that goes into it. I've always wanted to do something that was just a little bit different, and, you know, growing up, I loved working with my hands, I loved helping people, and the human body is the most amazing machine. So once I found out about the career, there really was no plan B. I just went for it, and it's a fantastic to be able to build the bonds with the patients And then there's something just unbelievably satisfying about being able to provide an arm or a leg for someone to, regain mobility or to follow their pursuits.
That's Neil Reddy. He's a certified prosthetist and orthotist at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital in Toronto. And as I mentioned, he was talking there about developing the running blades and other prosthetics for the Paralympians on Team Canada who are competing in Paris that use those devices. CBC is the official Canadian broadcaster of the Paralympic Games. Maybe you checked out some of the competition. Canada already with, I think it's 3 medals, if I have my count right. You can catch the coverage on CBC television, radio, and on CBC Gem throughout the games. And that app, by the way, if you got Gem, really, really great to use during the games. You can pick your sport. You can go back if you missed a competition. You can check the medal counts and standings. So it's really, really accessible and usable. So it should be. Let's talk about what we have coming up. Speaking of local Paralympians, as the games in Paris continue, a former Paralympian from here in Manitoba, Kirby Cote, one of the most decorated of all time, says she wants to remind people that the elite athletes at the top of their game are one thing, but not every person living with a disability has that as a goal to compete on the world stage. Some people just want the world of sport to be more accessible so they can go golfing with their friends or maybe play pickleball. And we don't have the facilities and infrastructure set up en masse to be able to make things as accessible as they should be when it comes to sport in Manitoba. So Kirby Cote is going to talk about that in the next hour of the show, on how an organization is matching Manitobans with the sport that is right for them where we do have facilities and where those gaps still exist. So stay tuned. That's coming up in the next hour of Information Radio.
Psst. Hey, Tiger.
Yeah, Polar Bear?
Is everyone gone?
You bet!
Let's party! When the Assiniboine Park Zoo closes, the party starts. Brew at the Zoo is back September 13th. Local brewers, live music, one great night. Brew at the Zoo, proudly sponsored by CBC. Hey, settle down, monkeys. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
They should make another one where it's like the wolves are all watching you while you're drinking your beer. It is 14. It's mainly clear in Winnipeg. Our high today is going to be 24, nice and sunny. Brandon, good morning to you. It's 10 degrees right now. Your clear sky, have a clear sky as well. And in Thompson, partly cloudy and 12 degrees. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC. Next on the show, the long weekend's almost upon us. Hopefully, if you have Monday off, you're not going to be checking email from work while you're trying to enjoy your long weekend or maybe sitting on a dock as you find some other way to relax in a special spot. But increasingly, that's not the reality for a lot of people, for a lot of workers. It is why some regions, including Australia, which is the latest this week, are bringing in the right to disconnect as legislation. To talk about this, Francis Sims is with us this morning, Associate Dean at Humber College in the Faculty of Applied Sciences and Technology. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. So how did we get to this place where we need legislation to help us disconnect from the office?
Yeah, I think a few things happened that contributed to this, and it only got worse during the pandemic when we all worked from home. First of all, a lot of companies in the last 5 to 10 years have started assigning work equipment to people. For example, cell phones. Many people, if they're lucky, they have a cell phone from work or a computer. And, when using those devices, people often use them both for work and for their personal use. Maybe use your cell phone to call, the school or to do calls to your mom or dad or something like this. And what it started to do is blur the lines between personal use and work use. And then as we started to move more online and working from home remotely, if you were able to do that, it also blurred the lines from a time perspective. So maybe you went to drop your daughter off at school or they forgot their lunch and you had to run over. Well, you felt like you had a debt to pay in terms of work, that at the end of the day, you took a little bit of time away in the middle of the day. Maybe at the end of the day, you need to pay that back and check those emails or get something done. So I think the technology has not helped, and it just got exacerbated over COVID. To the point where now over 25 countries globally actually have this right to disconnect legislation. Australia is just the latest in that group.
It's going to be hard to pull back because I know a lot of people like to point the finger at employers, but I mean those that are managing and are the employers even at the top realms, I would argue, are probably the most connected when they're supposed to have time off as well because they're human beings too. But at the worker level and more of the staff level, it's also sort of you described that people might want to work differently as well. So, for example, somebody might say, oh, I don't mind being contacted. I would rather have 2 hours off in the middle of the day to go and do something that I need to do. So if an employer was flexible around that, and then another person says, please don't contact me after 5, then all of a sudden those that are, managing teams have to sort of juggle all of this. How does the legislation, work to try to, find a way through?
Yeah, it's complicated and it's different in different countries. In Australia, employers, if they want to, they can contact their employees after work. However, an employee has the right not to respond and not to be penalized for that. So say an employer, is anxious about finishing a report for the meeting the next morning and wants you to do one more calculation in your spreadsheet. Well, you should be able to ignore it and not be penalized for it. There's no harsh words. There's nothing said. You still get your bonus if you're lucky to get one. And if that doesn't happen, then ultimately there can be a penalty of about $18,000 or $19,000 for the employer, for doing that. Now, there are certain situations, even with the Australian law, you could be a shift worker. You could be a nurse at the hospital and somebody else canceled and can't come into their shift because they're sick. Well, an employer needs to call you and ask you if you'll work. That's just the nature of that business. Or you can imagine you're a restaurant employee and the same kind of thing. There's not enough people on staff. They may want to call you and ask you if you want to work. Those things are within the realm of what's acceptable. But the bottom line here with the Australia law is that they're saying that you have a right to refuse, not to respond, and not be penalized. Now, since they implemented the law, we've heard some reports from people saying, yeah, my boss said I don't have to work after hours. However, they said to leave the work phone at the office and the work car at the office. You imagine if you're a salesperson. So even though, I think it's going to have to be played through to see if, what will come of that. But you can already see organizations being worried about that law being put in place because they're worried about productivity and they're worried about being able to meet deadlines. So it's a really difficult situation. In Canada, we don't have a Canada-wide law for the right to disconnect. There is a law in Ontario, but the law basically says that employers need to have a policy in place that talks about what the expectations are when you're working and not working. But it's not necessarily enforceable. And if you're a salary employee, right, you're getting paid, say $80,000, $60,000 a year, well, there's probably an expectation that you get your work done within that period of time. And the employer may not necessarily care when you're physically in the office. And to your point, people are looking for flexible work arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's all great. It's just hard to manage.
So what'll help it be easier to manage if this is the way we're going? If you look at what would make the right to disconnect legislation be more effective, what's missing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what they've done, so some of the leading countries, as you can imagine, are in Europe around this, France, Germany. Volkswagen, they actually have a policy in place for some employees where they do not receive emails after work. So they have a tool. I mean, it's like when we talk about students being able to use Instagram or Snapchat in class. Well, because these companies can turn those tools off on the phones during a certain period of time. Companies can do the same thing with emails, with MS Teams, with Slack. So what we see in some of the European countries is those companies are actually doing that. And they feel that it's not necessarily impacting productivity. That's always the big concern here, is that if I implement a rule like this, is it going to mean that I miss my deadlines? But ultimately it's pay now or pay later. The International Health Association organization said that people that work more than 55 hours per week have a 35% higher chance of having a stroke or heart attack than people that work between 35 and 40 hours a week. So I don't think it's so much about flexible work time. It's about the amount of time that you're actually spending working.
Really appreciate the analysis, Francis. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That's Francis Sims, an associate dean at Humber College in the Faculty of Applied Sciences and Technology, talking about yet another place in the world, Australia, the latest this week, to bring in the right to disconnect legislation around work. It is 3 minutes now to 7 o'clock, and Matt Humphrey is in for Heather Wells this week and has our headlines.
Good morning. Breaking news this morning. The Columbus Blue Jackets say American hockey star Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew have died in an unimaginable tragedy. The team confirmed the death of the brothers in a social media post. No other details are available at this time surrounding the incident. We'll have more on the story as it develops.
Wow, that's just really literally breaking news just while you were out of the newsroom between 7:30 and 8 here. Or pardon me, 6:30 and 7 here.
Yeah, and the NHL commissioners weighed in as well, saying he was more than just a dazzling hockey player. He was a doting father and a beloved husband, son, brother, and teammate who endeared himself to every person fortunate enough to have crossed his path.
Thanks, Matt, for the latest on that.
Back soon.
Obviously, we'll watch the story. We also have sports coming up here at 7:25, so as we'll get some more details, we'll share them with you. We do have details on what your day is going to be like in Winnipeg and across Manitoba. Clear in the city right now, 14 degrees. Our high here today is 24 with sunshine. Tonight, partly cloudy, low 12, and tomorrow, windy and a high of 22 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud to start the weekend and the long weekend. We have a nice clear sky out there this morning. On the morning commute, 788-3093 is where you can reach us, but so far so good so early on the morning commute. If you need to update us, let us know at that phone number. In the next hour of the show, a Rogers Network ad you might have noticed has only added fuel to the fire for unionized Canadian actors who've been in an ongoing dispute with Canadian agencies. Many of them say they haven't been able to audition for ads with Canadian brands for over 2 years. We're going to talk to an actor from Winnipeg now living in Toronto who's in that situation. And we're also going to play that ad that has got everybody up in arms. In addition, the next hour of the show, for a former Paralympic swimmer, accessible sport is about much more than medals. It's an opportunity to stay active and to find community and to try to do it here in Manitoba. So we're going to find out how Manitobans living with disabilities can get involved in the right sport for them, and also where the gaps are in terms of sports being accessible and facilities here. And then at 10 to 8 to Serious Matters. Why would a convicted serial killer not be designated automatically a dangerous offender? We're going to look at the law today in the aftermath of Jeremy Skibitsky's sentencing in Winnipeg this week. So lots coming up, a busy hour ahead. Stay with CBC.
On The Current. Afghan women have had their rights removed so much that human rights groups are calling it gender apartheid.
I'm Susan Ormiston. The Taliban has brought in new, even stricter rules saying women's voices can't even be heard in public. What 3 Afghans in Canada want the world to do to help those who stayed behind.
The Current. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. Americans are getting a better idea of what a Kamala Harris presidency could look like. The Democratic nominee sat down for her first major television interview since assuming the role. Katie Nicholson is in Washington and is following the story for us. Katie, the main takeaways from this interview, what are they?
Kamala Harris cleared this hurdle with her running mate by her side. No gaffes. What America did get was her position again on issues like the war in Gaza, that Israel has a right to defend itself, but too many Palestinians have died, and a deal must be struck to free hostages and end the war. On illegal immigration, that she will sign into law that tough bipartisan border bill that failed earlier this year after Donald Trump instructed Republicans not to vote for it. And she clarified where she stood on issues like fracking. She says now that she will not ban fracking. When pressed on what were perceived as policy pivots over the years, she repeatedly stated her values had not changed. And she spoke with great respect for President Biden and his legacy, but also indicated she is eager to turn the page and move forward from this divisive period in politics.
I'm talking about an era that started about a decade ago, where there is some suggestion, warped I believe it to be, that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, instead of where I believe most Americans are, which is to believe that the true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up.
And Harris indicated her commitment to ending the political divide in America, saying she would appoint a Republican to her cabinet to ensure a diversity of perspectives at the top tier of her government.
Donald Trump among the many closely watching this interview. He's scheduled to debate Harris on September 10th. What's he saying?
Donald Trump posted and reposted criticism of Harris's interview performance from right-leaning media sources. He also posted on social media platform Truth Social that her answers were rambling and incoherent, as well as a one-word review in all caps with many exclamation marks, boring. And that's oddly enough just the thing. Traditionally, pre-Trump era, political interviews were known for being rather dry. The question is, are Americans now ready to return to a world where their politics is more staid and, as Trump said, boring?
The CBC's Katie Nicholson in Washington. Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
To the Middle East now, and a warning from the UN. A failure to deliver polio vaccines would be disastrous for children, not only in Gaza, but beyond. It comes ahead of a planned break in fighting in Gaza on Sunday to allow the World Health Organization to begin a vaccination campaign there. Julia Chapman has the details.
Inside Gaza, more than 1.2 million polio vaccines sit waiting to be used. They're destined for children under the age of 10. Health officials will start administering the vaccines on Sunday if fighting stops in the agreed areas. Louise Wateridge is a UN spokesperson in Gaza.
Any military operations during the time we are trying to roll out a vaccination campaign will affect our ability to deliver these vaccinations to children.
Polio has returned to Gaza after 25 years. The nearly eradicated disease has become resurgent amid mass displacement and poor sanitation. Nafeen Abu al-Jidyan's son Abdul Rahman was the first confirmed case. She told CBC News the 11-month-old has become weak and immobile. Health officials say prevention is key, especially with medical facilities badly damaged and poorly supplied. But moving supplies around the enclave is extremely dangerous. Yesterday, an American NGO carrying medical aid was targeted with an airstrike. Israel says armed assailants were trying to hijack the convoy. The charity says several transport company workers were killed. And earlier this week, Israeli forces shot a clearly marked World Food Programme vehicle. Israel says the incident happened because of a communication error. Julia Chapman, CBC News, London.
Some breaking news to tell you about now. NHL player Johnny Gaudreau has died. News of his death coming in a statement from the NHL. The cause of his death yet to be confirmed. The 31-year-old was a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets, but broke into the NHL with Calgary and played 8 seasons for the Flames. Gaudreau was a 7-time All-Star and was known in hockey circles by the nickname Johnny Hockey. We'll get the latest look at the state of the Canadian economy with Statistics Canada tabling its second quarter GDP update. Comes less than a week from the Bank of Canada's September interest rate setting. Most analysts expect to see that economic growth continues to be modest, in theory, well-positioned if interest rates continue to come down. The central bank's rate setting is set for Wednesday. Immigration shaping up to be a major talking point when Parliament resumes next month. Earlier this week, Immigration Minister Mark Miller announced there would be big changes coming to Canada's immigration programs. And the leader of the official opposition is now responding. The CBC's Kate McKenna has been following the issue in Ottawa. Kate, what did Pierre Poilievre say?
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said he'd rein in Canada's population growth if elected, saying growth should be tied to a level below the number of new homes built and capacity to access healthcare and jobs. Yesterday, he took aim at the Liberal record on immigration.
First of all, we have to acknowledge that Justin Trudeau has destroyed our immigration system. We had a multi-generational consensus in immigration for literally decades before Trudeau came along.
This week, Immigration Minister Mark Miller announced a tightening of rules that his own government loosened around the Temporary Foreign Workers Program to prevent the workers from being abused and to make sure that young Canadians are able to access entry-level jobs. He also signaled that this fall could see big tweaks to some of Canada's permanent residency programs. This comes as experts warn that Canada's rapid population growth is putting a major strain on housing stock because there are more people coming to Canada than there are houses being built. As a a result, prices are soaring and young people are being priced out. Last year, the immigration minister announced a cap on the international student permits when that program spiked, but temporary immigration numbers are still at a historic high. At the cabinet retreat this week, Miller said that all options are on the table when it comes to looking for solutions. He said we're likely to hear an update in November. It's another sign that immigration is set to be the biggest subject of debate when the House of Commons sits again in September.
Kate McKenna in Ottawa. Thanks, Kate.
You're welcome.
A German court has rejected the appeal of a 99-year-old Nazi. The elderly woman was convicted of aiding in the killing of more than 10,000 people. Rebecca Collard has the story.
A court in the German city of Leipzig confirming the guilty verdict against 99-year-old Irmgard Faulkner. She was convicted as an accessory to the murders of over 10,000 people in the Stutthof concentration camp, where she was a secretary in her late teens. Federal Judge Kai Hamdorf explained that in her role, Faulkner was responsible for ordering Zyklon B, the deadly chemical used by the Nazis in mass extermination. Raphael Van Riel says trials like this one are important, even for a 99-year-old woman. But
I have mixed feelings about it because on the one hand, it is important that people will be caught and will be put on trial. On the other hand, they sort of make individuals responsible for something that is a structural problem.
Amalika Gottstein points out that many more senior Nazis avoided prosecution.
Because obviously many people who had very important positions during the Nazi regime then continue to have very important positions as politicians, but also in companies.
Authorities say they will not stop trying to find and prosecute Nazis. But almost 80 years after the fall of the Nazi regime, few perpetrators are still alive. Rebecca Collard for CBC News, Berlin.
And finally, Jacob Wasserman is making his Paralympics debut this morning in para-rowing. Wasserman was a Humboldt Broncos bus crash survivor. In October 2022, he tried rowing for the first time. Less than 2 years later, he's representing Canada at the Games in Paris. CBC caught up with his wife, Madison Toombs Wasserman, on the streets of the French capital.
You know, I think Jacob is incredibly determined, and I don't think he's ever going to settle for less than his best, and not the medal, but his best. And so he continues to push towards that every single day.
Madison says Jacob was aiming to take part in the 2028 Games in Los Angeles. It came as quite a surprise when he found out he would be competing in Paris 4 years earlier. Well, that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Well, we made it to Friday morning, everyone, with the Labor Day long weekend now knocking on our door. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC's Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. We've got a nice clear sky out there this morning, and it's going to be beautifully sunny. Abby with your full forecast in a moment. Well, this hour on the show, a Rogers ad featuring an American actor is pouring salt in the wound for unionized Canadian actors. A dispute between the Alliance of Canadian Cinema, Television and Radio Artists, or ACTRA, and the Institute of Canadian Agencies has put up walls for some unionized actors in Canada. We're going to hear about that from an actor. Stay tuned. In addition, this hour on the program, coming up at 7:50, we're going to be having a look at the sentence for Jeremy Skibitsky. Now, we did this yesterday, but today we're going to ask a specific question. Why would a convicted serial killer not be designated a dangerous offender? We look at the law today in the aftermath of the sentencing in Winnipeg this week. Right now, let's get into other details and stories with Matt Humphrey.
Good morning. CUPE healthcare workers in 5 of the 6 health regions have rejected the latest tentative agreement, meaning a strike is now possibly imminent. In a bargaining update sent to members, CUPE says its bargaining team will be heading back to the table with a strike mandate. And a strike date has not been set, but the union says it is preparing for job action. We'll hear more details at 7:30. And as Marcy touched on, 1 day after a Winnipeg serial killer was sentenced to life in prison for murdering 4 people, the victims' families gathered for a memorial ceremony meant to close this emotional chapter of their lives. We saw that last night. Premier Wab Kinew spoke and sang during the ceremony. Today, he intends to go to the Prairie Green landfill to check on the search progress and see how that effort is going. We'll hear from the Premier at the bottom of the hour.
All right, thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
Time right now is 7:12, and as promised, here's Abby with your forecast.
14 degrees in Winnipeg, mainly clear out there. The sun making its appearance. We should see more of our sunny conditions throughout the day. A bit breezy. We warm up to 24. Some skies would definitely be rolling in later. Then that clears off tonight before more would come overnight. And we head to that high of at 24. Thompson partially cloudy at this time at 12. We're seeing light rain in Churchill at 9. And then down south from Brandon all the way down to Maurice, we're seeing temperatures hover between 11 and 14. And the sun, it's making its appearance. So that's like a good sign for the start of a long weekend.
I know. They made the announcements too this week. It's to the time of year. You're talking about the sun and the weather and the slight shift. It was cooler morning, but they're going to be closing some of the facilities, right? Some of the wading pools and stuff. The splash pads stay, I think, for another week. But yeah.
So enjoy it. Enjoy the sunny conditions
100%.
this weekend.
Yeah, take advantage of it. All right, let's get into the morning commute. You also need to take advantage of it because you're going to get ticketed Monday if you start going
school zones
too fast in those zones, right?
School zones, you got to slow down. Starting Monday from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., just like those signs say, 30 is the speed limit from Monday to Friday. So make sure that you are just aware of your surroundings, of where you're at and the people around you as you commute starting on. I mean, you should always be doing that, but in school zones, specifically Monday, you should really be focusing on that. Not much going on right now on the commute, but I am here at Portage and Spence, and you're out there on your commute wherever you might be, and I would love to hear from you. If you are spotting something that is either slowing you down, getting in your way, or maybe is just something interesting that you think your fellow commuters should know about, you can call our commuter line to let us know what you're seeing at 204-788-3093.
Time right now is 7:14 a.m. And up next, as we head into this Labor Day long weekend, a Rogers ad has poured, as I mentioned, salt in the wound for some Canadian actors. Let's listen to this. You'll probably have seen it somewhere. It's American actor John Krasinski, and he's featured in a Rogers ad. He's on a boat, he's in the middle of the water, and he's dancing to Taylor Swift.
Rogers has the largest and most reliable 5G network in Canada, so John can do amazing things. Like dance, as if no one's watching. Well, almost no one. We do our thing, so you can do yours.
Now, for some, that ad doesn't seem like a big deal. But as I alluded to, for some unionized Canadian actors, it's a reminder of the ongoing dispute that is putting, they say, their livelihood at risk. For 62 years, the Alliance of Canadian Cinema, Television and Radio Artists, which we know as ACTRA, and the Institute of Canadian Agencies has had a deal, the National Commercial Agreement. So in April of 2022, when the time came to renew that deal, both the ICA and ACTRA were unable to come to an agreement. So what does that mean? Well, my next guest says it can leave actors to face the consequences. Actors like Justin Otto, he's from Winnipeg, but he is currently acting and living in Toronto, and he joins us via Zoom. Good morning.
Morning, Marcy. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So take us into this. You see that ad, and as an actor, what do you feel like in the pit of your stomach?
I think I can reiterate this point from a lot of ACTRA members, and it rubs us the wrong way. It sort of pisses us off. You see that, and you're reminded that this dispute's been going on for more than 2 years now, and there's not much leeway, and monopolies like Rogers is seeing us as viable.
In terms of how it has actually impacted you, have you seen a difference in auditions, or how has your life been affected by this?
Oh, definitely. Let's say any given week, I'd see 4 to 6 commercial auditions with a lot of work in Toronto, and now it's maybe one. And it's not like the commercials aren't getting made. I'll still turn on the TV, watch sports, and there's a fine non-union performer, but non-union on the TV.
In terms of how you've been able to supplement your income, then how are you doing? That's a big difference. 3 to 4 auditions down to 1.
Yeah, it's huge. And I mean, for a lot of people, it means having to start new careers. For me, it just means working more hours at the bar, which, on paper is fine. Bills get paid, but it's a lot of time and energy taken away from our craft, right?
Are a lot of actors having these discussions right now? Like, what's the nature of the discussion with in your circle?
Yeah, a lot of discussions, a lot of anger, also a lot of, I think the stasis brings about a lot of anxiety, some actor members, some friends of mine are contemplating, moving, selling their homes, just a lot of uncertainty, which is tough.
Now, this has been 2 years without a deal. Did you start to see the difference in call-outs for auditions right away, or has that been gradual over time and now you're at this point?
Yeah, I think it was steady. I mean, at first, I think a lot of companies were standing with us, and now slowly it feels like, they can see the cracks in the way to, either save money or not uphold agreements. So definitely it's kind of the snowball falling down the mountain metaphor I'd use.
And take me into your craft a little bit. So choosing an American actor would do what over a Canadian? You mentioned save money. Are they also going for, like, I mean, obviously the one we played is a big name with John Krasinski. So what are the reasons that they would go that direction?
Yeah, a lot of times it's tax credits, saving money. Obviously, you're going to get a name, but a few actor members have already made this point in other programs. I'd point out Fiona Hyatt on CBC's Commotion podcast talking about, I'm not losing a job to John Krasinski, but there's plenty of name recognition in Canadian actors. I mean, we could name a few. It's like, even if it was Seth Rogen, someone who's under a SAG-AFTRA deal, at least that's a person that we as Canadians recognize and know that that's Canadian talent. So you add on to the effect that it's American, and plus they're skirting the lines of our union. You're like, okay, so you're just going to double dip here.
People may not be familiar with your field to understand why auditioning for ads is important. Can you outline that, like why that's important?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge supplement on our income. I feel like, especially as a Canadian actor, there's only so many film and television gigs to go about. And so we kind of see auditioning for commercials and that work as sort of the long-term goals of our finances. Say, like, many of my friends, myself included, will see commercials as, the way to pay off our health insurance, the way to, plan for the future versus just going gig to gig, which, talent aside, is always going to be, tough for a Canadian actor.
Because, and tell me if I'm wrong here, because if you're in an ad, right, you're paid every time it's shown. Is that right? Or
yeah,
sometimes
depending on how, yeah, you might get buyouts, which are larger sums of money. But yeah, I've done commercials where all of a sudden there's a little bit of a sports reference in it, and now Stanley Cup playoffs start, and I go, oh, I have surprise money. Now I have a few extra dollars that I can, invest, I can plan.
How attainable is it as a Canadian actor, given this and also just the general landscape of things, to pursue acting in this country as a full-time career?
Yeah, even with commercials, it's difficult, with all the buyouts and tax credits that go to American actors. And even that is a huge dispute with our union actor and other governing bodies, is like how to get the Canadian actor to work on our soil more. So I think without commercials, we're sort of taking out 40 to 65% of our income, of our work,
You obviously from Winnipeg, but now in Toronto. Was that directly because of, being able to have a more sustainable living as an actor there versus here?
Yeah, I think, especially since I moved, Winnipeg, Manitoba in general is a booming film and television market. But yeah, at the time I moved here, especially with commercials in mind, right? Like I could work just as steadily in Winnipeg with film and television, a lot of Hallmark, but the commercial industry is definitely on the coast. Vancouver's a little dwindling, but Toronto is sort of the hotbed for, kind of just being the working class actor, as I see it as.
Why did you pursue this in the first place? Why did you want to become an actor?
I love telling stories. At the end of the day, a great ad is telling a story, right? So, and I just love seeing the community that builds. It's especially tough when you feel like Canadians don't feel like they have a place in our market.
How hopeful are you, Justin, that the ICA and actor are going to be able to reach a new deal, given that you're going on 2 years now?
Yeah, hope's the major thing an actor has at all times, we hope for the best at all times. But I think I'm renewed by, this added press, the fact that things are being seen, because as you iterated to begin this interview, I find that a lot of times you watch commercials, you watch ads, you don't know that face is non-union, so the awareness for the public is just great because, I think we can all get behind in the state of affairs, late stage capitalism, as it were. We're sort of in the days of dying unions, and we should all band strong together, I think.
Thank you very much for your perspective this morning. Appreciate having you with us via Zoom.
Oh, thanks, Marcy. I really appreciate it.
That's Justin Otto, actor from Winnipeg. I just want to read some statements here to close. We did reach out to the ICA for a comment, CBC did. So in a statement, they said, quote, the ICA remains committed to modernizing the National Commercial Agreement to ensure fairness and competitiveness for everyone involved. And we're disappointed that ACTRA continues to make false claims, they say, including characterizing the dispute as a lockout, quote unquote. This is simply not the case. The statement goes on to say that the ICA and its member agencies are committed to long-term and sustainable union performance work for Canadian performers and agencies, end quote. Now, you know where I'm going next. We did also reach out to ACTRA. It says for quote, for 2+ years, ACTRA members have been locked out by the Institute of Canadian Agencies and 15 of the major advertising agencies it represents. Publicis Canada, which created the Rogers ad, is one of 15 ad agencies that continues to replace unionized ACTRA performers with non-union actors. And in the case of this ad, is a notable U.S. actor. So that's the totality of the statements and explanations we've been given around where this is at. If you want to weigh in, maybe you're an actor and you're affected by this as well, and you want to share your perspective with us, you can always give us a call at 788-3205.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world, staying on top of stories around the globe, and connected close to home. It's news you can trust, delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
Hearts will race. Champions will emerge.
The Canadian is a champion.
Medals will shine. The best of the best are set to compete for Paralympic glory. Experience the extraordinary with extended live coverage and full event replays. The 2024 Paralympics begin August 28th, live from Paris. Watch free on CBC Gem.
One of the most decorated Paralympians in our Manitoba history, Kirby Cote, in the pool, will join us actually live in studio at 7:40 to talk about the games, but also to talk about how they're doing work here to help Manitobans living with disabilities find the right sport for them. And whether that's at a high competitive level or just the ability to go out and golf or play pickleball with friends, there's some work that's being done on that front. So we're going to hear more at 7:40 all about it. Right now, though, we turn our attention to other sports and to breaking and devastating news this morning in the world of sport. Paul McGowan is here to talk more about it. Hi there, Paul.
Hi, Marcy.
So let's start obviously with hockey. I shouldn't say obviously, but if listeners weren't with us, about half hour ago when this was breaking, the Columbus Blue Jackets in the NHL are saying that forward Johnny Gaudreau has died.
Yeah, we're seeing statements this morning from both the team and the league that Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew have died. We don't know the official cause of death. There are reports, though, that they were killed in a traffic accident in their home state of New Jersey. Gaudreau, of course, a longtime Calgary Flame, one of the best American players in the league, and someone who was a role model to a lot of young players. And beyond the way that hockey players are typically a role model, Gaudreau was on the shorter side, a late pick in the draft, but turned himself into a star. And then, of course, beyond the hockey stuff, beyond being an electrifying player, was a husband and a father and everything else. There's not much more to say at this point, except that it is a sad day across a lot of hockey circles.
Yeah, I think he was just 31 years old as well.
31, yeah.
Brother was 29. More detail throughout the day, obviously. All right, let's move to other news involving our Bombers, the CFL. First placed in the West is on the line this Sunday.
Yeah, and on its face, it seems like a very achievable task. The Riders might be the worst first-place team in pro sports right now. They are winless in their last 5, which is not to say that Sunday's game will be easy. Coach Mike O'Shea talked about the challenge of walking into a packed Mosaic Stadium.
It's a pretty interesting place to play, going into Regina. I mean, the fans are pretty passionate. Everybody that you look at when you're there will be wearing green of some sort. They all have jerseys. They all probably have second jerseys. They travel far to go to the games, and they're passionate fans. So I think every player, whether it's home or away, wants to play in front of a full house.
Mike O'Shea talking there like he's David Attenborough and Riders fans are some newly discovered species. Should be a fun one. Bombers and Riders get going at 6 on Sunday.
Let's go to the Paralympics now. It didn't take long for Canada to get its first medals.
Not long at all. Canada's first medal is one of the first of the Paralympics, and it comes in paracycling, the 500-meter time trial. Calgary's Kate O'Brien takes home the bronze.
This one is just huge, being able to have my family here and kind of get through sort of a tough year of training and some changes in some of my disabilities. But it feels so amazing to be able to have this medal, which is, the first medal of the games. I've never experienced that before.
Yeah, a tough year of training for O'Brien. 3 months ago, she didn't know if she'd be able to get on a bike, let alone make these games. Also, a second medal for Canada yesterday, this one in the pool. Swimming star Aurélie Rivard captured her 11th Paralympic medal, earning a bronze in the women's 50-meter freestyle.
Finally, the Blue Jays got a win in their finale with the Red Sox, at least.
Yeah, they come out on the right side of another low-scoring game. This is one in part, thanks in part to Bowden Francis. He is a heck of a story right now. Has given up just 6 hits over his last 4 games. Jays manager John Schneider is mildly impressed.
Bowden bleeping Francis. 5th inning was like, all right, here we go. He was just in total control. I mean, he's got such a good way about him, mentally, physically, execution-wise. His pitch mix is awesome. Not much more to say other than he's really good right now.
Censoring himself only to swear on live TV moments later is peak John Schneider. Bowden Francis with a very real chance to be named American League Pitcher of the Month for August. The Blue Jays, by the way, open a series in Minnesota tonight.
All right. Thanks a lot, Paul. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Marcy. You too.
That's Paul McGowan with Morning Sports. We're coming up to 7:30 in news time. I want to mention a story that we have that we'll have a discussion about 10 to 8 this morning. There are, of course, notorious Canadian serial killers, but why was Robert Pickton never deemed a dangerous offender and Paul Bernardo was? Today, we're going to look at the law as the community here continues to react to the sentencing of serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky. So stay tuned. We'll have that discussion coming up. In addition, I want to mention that we have decorated Paralympian of the past, Kirby Cote, who's going to be joining us in studio live. Really excited to be seeing her. She's going to be talking about how to make sport accessible for all here in Manitoba and the ways that they're matching people living with disabilities with different sports. So we'll stay tuned for that conversation as well. In terms of traffic, things are moving fine. I suspect a lot of people took today off to stretch out the Labor Day long weekend potentially. So traffic volumes seem to be a little bit lower through the downtown. Call us though if you do see a problem wherever you're driving. 788-3093. Up in Churchill, some light rain, by the way, some smoke affecting Barons River, and we had fog up north earlier. But here in the south, it's pretty clear and sunny, and it's around 14 degrees in Winnipeg. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. At 7:30, it's mainly sunny and 11 degrees in Brandon, 14 degrees and clear over downtown Winnipeg. Good morning, I'm Matt Humphrey. QP healthcare workers in 5 of 6 areas have rejected a tentative agreement, making a strike a possibility. Community support and facility workers at Riverview Health Centre, who are under the WRHA, have voted against the agreement. Shared Health community support and facility workers, along with community health workers at Southern Health Santé Sud, have also rejected it. In a bargaining update sent to members, QP says its bargaining team will now go back to the table with a strike mandate. A strike date has not been set, but the union says it is preparing for job action. CBC News has contacted the WRHA, Shared Health, and Southern Health Santé Sud for response. Premier Wab Kinew sang a Lakota song of remembrance at the Forks last night. Manitoba's premier was one of the speakers at a memorial honoring the victims of a serial killer who was sentenced this week. Canoe says the victims' families deserve special praise for their advocacy. He says their efforts rallied the public behind the cause of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and searching the landfill for the remains of murder victims.
You really changed the conversation, you changed the thinking, and you changed the way people look at this. And you never should have had to do that. But given the situation that you were put into, you handled yourselves with the utmost of grace and courage, and even in vulnerable moments, a tremendous amount of strength.
Canoe says today he will visit the Prairie Green landfill to see how search plans are progressing. Meanwhile, this week's sentencing of Jeremy Skibitsky has some people calling for a change in the law. Skibitsky was given one life sentence for each of the 4 women he killed, but those prison terms will be served concurrently, meaning he'll be eligible for parole to apply for parole in 25 years. Karen Wiebe is the executive director of the Manitoba Organization for Victim Assistance. Her son was murdered in 2003.
You may say that he has 4 sentences, but what does that really mean? It really means nothing because he's serving them all at the same time. The value that is placed on each person's life that's been lost is lessened.
The Conservative federal government of Stephen Harper passed legislation in 2011 allowing for consecutive life sentences, but that was struck down in a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court 11 years later. One of the heads of a City of Winnipeg committee set up to help decolonize the city's public spaces says she's frustrated by a lack of buy-in from the public. Rihanna McKay is the co-chair of Welcoming Winnipeg. They've been asking people online to suggest new names for Air Canada Window Park on Portage Avenue downtown. But she says the vast majority of submissions they've received from the public are negative and tinged with racism.
It feels like we're trying to do something really good within this committee, and at times we're feeling like we're taking 2 steps forward, but really is just 10 steps back because of the large majority of the population are still very discriminatory to this perspective and this way of being.
McKay says it's important for public spaces used by Indigenous people to have names that better reflect them. Well, it's the news 2,500 people from Bunabanabe Cree Nation have been waiting for. Yesterday, they got word they can start returning to their community in northeast Manitoba. The province says a wildfire burning 10 kilometers south of the community is being held. Chief Richard Hart says people are happy they can go home.
Very good news. It's the news that we've been waiting for a few weeks now, and a lot of people are extremely excited that they can start getting ready to start returning home.
But Hart says unlike the evacuation, which took several days, it may take as long as 2 weeks to get everyone back home. He says the difference this time is the Hercules military planes used in the evac aren't available for the return flight. Hart says essential services will be the first to go back using scheduled aircraft and smaller charters, and people with health issues who were the first out may be amongst the last to go home. And finally, the Columbus Blue Jackets say American hockey star Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew have died after a, quote, unimaginable tragedy. The team confirmed the death of the brothers in a social media post, but no other details surrounding the incident have been released. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman also released a statement saying, quote, Gaudreau was more than just a dazzling hockey player. He was a doting father and beloved husband, son, brother, and teammate who endeared himself to every person fortunate enough to have crossed his path, end quote. Gaudreau was 31 years old. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
Such a sad story, Matt. We'll have to get more detail through the day about what happened, right?
And surprising.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Back soon.
That is Matt Humphrey from our news department this morning. It is 7:35 a.m. It is the last Friday of August. Abby, with the important forecast, it tells us what we can do for the Labor Day long weekend.
Some sunshine into the weekend, my friend. We're expecting sunny conditions across board. Most areas will see some clouds rolling later, but that's just the best part of it. And then we'll see chance of showers in other region. We're looking at temperatures climbing from 15 to 24, 15 in Churchill, and then it's going to get to 24 for Steinbach and Morris. Winnipeg at 14 at this time. The sun making its appearance. We'll see this stay with us for the most of the day. We're heading to a high of 24. A bit of breezy conditions will come in. Brandon at 11, seeing sunny conditions also at this time, and then a transition to a mix of sun and clouds, high of a 24. Thompson is partly cloudy at this time at 12 degrees, heading to a high of 20. Light rain we're seeing in Churchill at 9 degrees, heading to a high of 15. Dauphin is at 14, heading to a high of 23. Gimli 13, light breeze at this time, you get to a high of 24. Steinbach is at 12, sunny already at that part of the province, and you're heading to a high of 24 also. In Morris, it is 11 degrees. Forecast for the Pembina Valley region says you'll see more of this sunny weather stay with you all day, heading to a high of 24, and it will be humid. But in summary, a sunny, breezy day ahead, and we're going to see highs close to 24.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And Chloe Friesen's popped back in to talk about the morning commute. Hello again.
Good morning. I think you're right, Marcy. I think everybody's taken an extra long weekend.
It's quiet out there,
it's
right?
So quiet out there. But just a reminder, Monday, school zones back in effect. So look out for those signs. 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. It is 30K from Monday to Friday. So make sure you're keeping that in mind as we head into next week, September. Very exciting. But if something is getting in your way, please let us know. 204-788-3093.
All right. Thank you, Chloe. Well, you're listening to CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or live on YouTube right now. Well, next on the show, with 7 gold medals and 6 silver, Kirby Cote is one of Canada's most decorated Paralympians. The blind para-swimmer made her Paralympic Games debut in the year 2000. She was 16 in Sydney, Australia. But Cote says not every disabled person wants to compete on the world stage, and that's okay. And there's much more to accessible sport than elite competition like the Paralympic Games. And she is today, Kirby Cote, Executive Director of Accessible Sport Connection Manitoba, and is in studio. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. So tell us more about this statement, that not every disabled person wants to be a Paralympian. As a Paralympian yourself, what's the context of that, and why is that important to say out loud?
Yeah, I mean, elite level sport is a commitment. It is something that not everybody wants to do. Not everybody wants to be the best in the world at the sport that they do, and that connects with the disability community as well. Just because you're a person with a disability doesn't mean you want to be a Paralympic athlete. Maybe you just want to go play pickleball with someone in your family or your friends, or ride a bicycle, or just enjoy a soccer game like everybody else after work.
Is it important to say in the context of the reality that we're making a lot of gains in terms of making all sport more accessible to people in Manitoba who are living with disabilities, but also there's gaps there to sports that you still can't, get to play?
Yeah, I think here in Manitoba, we have a fantastic bunch of sport organizations, like provincial sport organizations, or just like individual places that are hosting accessible and inclusive events. So places where anyone can show up. It's like all ages, all abilities, you're invited to kind of choose your own adventure. We have a lot of that. I think that's really like very Winnipeg at heart too, like especially here in the city, is we have a lot of events that really include everybody. But otherwise, we do have the same systemic barriers that a lot of people have to accessing sport. So like financial commitments to buying adapted equipment that's insanely large amounts of cost. Like a basketball wheelchair can cost $10,000 up. Same with an adapted bike. It really depends on what the person's needs are, and then transportation of getting there, finding someone to help you. There's just all these little extra barriers that make it a little bit more difficult to leave your house and be physically active. But I think we're also seeing that overcome by like really cool like sharing of resources. And like I said, I think people care. Like our community wants everybody to be physically active, and there are people that are just really creative. I think you see a lot of creativity and curiosity when we're trying to create adapted sport.
Where are people sharing resources, as you said? Like, would that just sort of be person to person, or are there networks that are building up to share equipment?
Yeah, so our organization, part of, I guess, our founding was really trying to create a website where, everyone on our board has a wealth of information of like how to find adapted sport, because a lot of people don't know like where to go, right? Like if I want to do this sport, who here in the city, who here in the province is inviting people with disabilities to, like, who's coaching them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who has the adapted equipment? So we tried to create a resource with as much as information as we can, and we're always adding to it, and we're always welcoming more. And then also people can reach out to me. I am somehow become a Rolodex of information and able to like connect people with possibly what they're looking for. And if I don't have an answer, I'm pretty good at finding it as well.
So let's talk about what you've been working on. What kinds of opportunities are there right now for parasport in Manitoba, like in terms of the number of leagues and what we do have?
Yeah, so like I said, it's really like, what do you want to play, and then let's figure it out. It becomes really individualized for the person with a disability and their age and their like ability, like as far as like how far they want to go up, like if they do want to become an elite level athlete. But I mean, we have, I don't know, like every 2 years we've been hosting an accessible sport expo, which gives people a chance to try the sport on the spot, all under one roof. We've had we average about 24 organizations there. So that's just one day.
Yep.
And I don't know, like I think there's a lot more than we think there is, and there's a lot more that I don't even know exists. So it's really a matter of like, oh, you want to go downhill skiing? Well, did you know that we just got brand new equipment last year? Like, or like, do you want to go swimming? Well, there's a bunch of coaches that would welcome you. It's really a matter of dreaming about what is the physical activity or sport that you want to do, and then we can help you connect.
Well, obviously swimming, you would have paved the way for that and been important with that from back in the day and all of your achievement in the province. I know that adaptive cycling apparently has become big, and archery. But what about the sports that you mentioned that might be for the people that just, want to be an everyday player and aren't seeking elite level? Like, what about golf, pickleball? How are we doing to, give people accessibility to those types of activities and sports?
I think golf's actually doing really well too. There's a ton of really neat adapted equipment and pieces that can go onto the back of a golf course. And, the barriers to golf might be like physically getting to the golf course, unless there's a bus stop nearby. How are you going to get out there sometimes? But yeah, I mean, I think it's really what our organization tries to do is help the person with a disability feel welcome. So, and like if they're inspired or curious about a sport and they want to reach out to us and be like, I've always wanted to try this. And maybe they want to find another person with a disability to come along with them, or they want to talk to the person who's coaching and hosting the event ahead of time and just tell them what their needs are and connect on that way. And just like, those are just really small ways that people can feel like they're invited and they're welcome to the space, if that makes sense.
Do you have a favorite story of someone that you're able to do that for, Kirby, that you spoke with, and then all of a sudden they were like, oh, I love this. I'm playing this sport now. I'm into this.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about our Paralympian, Leanne Taylor, who's competing, I think, in like 2 days in triathlon. I definitely met her in the hospital 30 days after her injury, I think it was. And she was already like, hi, I heard that you know things about a sport. Tell me. And she has beautiful stories that she's been posting. But the one that I thought was really cool is we first introduced her to wheelchair basketball. And when she went to try it, I believe something like 20 of her friends and family came out to try it with her. And I thought that was really cool. But that's not a one-off, like that's pretty common. We all have kind of people that we can lean on, and having that mentorship and people cheering you on really makes it easier to try something new. And that's like everybody.
I love that story.
Yeah.
What needs to change when it comes to how Manitoba or even Canada approaches accessible support and maybe supports it?
Yeah, I think a lot of things for people with disabilities haven't been led by the disability community. Our boards, our coaching, our national sport organizations, there aren't people with disabilities in positions of leadership. And that's where we see some of the failures. Yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest thing is really like including the voice of what the community wants because like I said, not everyone wants to be an elite level Paralympic athlete and often that's where all the funding and attention goes. And then I think there's a big intersectionality. So, I hang out a lot with the cycling and like active transport advocacy community because it makes my life better as well, just from an accessibility standpoint. So I think there's a lot of really cool intersectionality there.
And just last, you mentioned Leanne Taylor. I mean, we only have 2 Manitobans competing in Paris at the Paralympic Games. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's kind of par for the course here in Manitoba. It is a little bit lower. We're right in the middle and we're surrounded by provinces that are, I don't know, they're just a lot more sport rich and they just like care a little bit more deeply about creating an elite level athlete of all abilities. And so I think it does reflect, like, I think we really connect more with like Newfoundland. Like that's like a province that we kind of reflect more as far as our sport platforms go. And I'm just going to shout out to Bethany Johnson, who's our other first Paralympic athlete doing women's wheelchair basketball.
I'm glad you did that.
Yeah.
Leanne was on the show this week. We're still trying to get Bethany on one of our programs.
Awesome.
We got those requests out. You can't go before we congratulate you here on CBC Airwaves. You're being inducted into Canada's Sport Hall of Fame this fall. What does the honor mean to you, Kirby?
I'm not a big Hall of Fame like person, I guess, but I have great memories of my time as an athlete and it really gives me opportunities to do leadership things here and now. But those awards I think are going to be kind of a moment to really thank my family because I wouldn't have been so successful without my parents and my sister's support. And so, I find those kind of things are almost a little bit more for them. And not even my family, Manitoba too. I had a lot of people here cheering me on and following my story. And it was like, now that I'm older and can reflect back on that, it's really meaningful.
Yeah. Do you still hit the pool like for casual laps and beat everybody and then go, oh, sorry?
No, no, I'm good. I've found other sources of physical activity.
Swam enough all through your teens.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming in. An important conversation about getting people, connected and understanding how to get connected to sport at any level in Manitoba. Appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
Kirby Cote is now the Executive Director of Accessible Sport Connection Manitoba and also, of course, a decorated Paris swimmer. If you want to explore the opportunities for accessible sport in the province, please visit their website and reach out. As Kirby said, it's often one person at a time to get these connections going and get things built up in a better way and better supported if you want to check it out. So that website is ASC Manitoba, full word, ascmanitoba.ca.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
7:48 a.m. is the time right now. Thanks for joining us here on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Mainly sunny, as we've been sharing with you. It's 14 degrees. Our high is 24. And the long weekend not looking too bad. Tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud, high 22, and then into Sunday and Monday, it's going to stay sunny for us. Beautiful sunshine on our YouTube shot right now, the view over downtown Winnipeg. Still some of those wet spots on the lens from yesterday's morning rain, but today, as I mentioned, it's going to be a dry day in Winnipeg. Well, next on Information Radio, if someone is a convicted serial killer, most of us would infer that they are a dangerous offender. But obtaining that designation in a court of law is more complicated than that. This week, serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky was handed 4 concurrent life sentences without the eligibility of parole for 25 years. The 37-year-old was found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, Rebecca Contois, and a 4th unidentified woman known as Mashkade Bishike Ikwe Iban. Now, Skibitsky was not labeled a dangerous offender. My next guest is here to help us understand the law around this. Frank Cormier is a criminology professor at the University of Manitoba. Good morning, Frank.
Good morning, Marcy.
So what does it legally mean to be designated a dangerous offender?
Well, being designated a dangerous offender, the main thing that it does is that it allows a court to impose what we call an indeterminate sentence. So meaning it's not any set certain number of years, but basically the offender can be held sort of until the parole board decides they could be let out. So it's a rather unusual, designation, and it's reserved for people who are deemed to be, a threat to the public, to the safety and well-being of other people. And it's often based upon repetitive behavior, the idea that an offender has shown they can't restrain themselves from committing serious crimes. It could be a display of indifference to the consequences of what they've done, meaning, they don't care about the damage they're causing. And there's also, it can be used in light of what's called the brutal nature of their behavior. That is, that a person was deemed that they're not inhibited sort of by the normal standards that other people might have.
Why would a prosecutor not seek that designation?
Well, the only reason, in the case of a clearly serious, dangerous person, the only reason not to seek it is if they are being convicted, and this is the case with Skibitsky, is that they're already being convicted of crimes that carry automatic penalties that are more serious and longer than those that are available under the dangerous offender legislation.
So if someone reads that it's 25 years without the chance of parole, and that's the sentence, but then they read that with dangerous offender designation, it can lead to indefinite imprisonment in some cases. Couldn't that be seen as a stiffer sentence? Like, wouldn't that be as close to life as our system could get?
Well, no, it's basically the same thing, because a life sentence, it means life, that the person will be under the supervision of the correctional system for the rest of their life. But yes, it does not mean that they will necessarily die in prison, which is, we hear some people saying, life should mean life, meaning the person should never ever get out. And the fact is that with the most serious offenders in Canada, they do spend the rest of their lives in prison. They never do get out, even though there is that possibility where parole can be considered after 25 years. So a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years, that is an indeterminate sentence. It means that the person may never get out of prison, and in the case of the most serious offenders, it has historically shown that they do not get out of prison. So adding a dangerous offender sentence on top of that isn't really necessary. It doesn't really make sense. And in fact, it would conflict, because when a dangerous offender designation is applied to a person, they are able to apply for parole after 7 years from the time that they are sentenced. And then if it's denied, every 2 years after that. So there's a reason that first-degree and second-degree murder are actually listed as being sort of excluded from dangerous offender regulations, because they would be in conflict with each other and would simply be redundant.
So it could also lead effectively to someone getting out sooner as well. But more importantly, that review comes up, and that means families, are also going to be having to deal with that maybe every 7 years, and then every 2 years after that, you said.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that the life sentence would sort of override that 7 year possibility. So even someone who is sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder, someone like Paul Bernardo, for example, who did have a dangerous offender designation added on, but the judge noted that the dangerous offender part was added with respect to multiple sexual assaults that Bernardo had committed, and not to the homicides, which is strictly legal under the rules of the law, but again would have no effect, because the 25 years would override the 7 years. So adding a dangerous offender tag would not allow the person to apply for parole earlier. But yes, you're right. Just even the specter that someone could somehow apply after 7 years rather than 25 could be really distressing for the survivors.
Can the Crown seek a dangerous offender designation after a sentence is handed down or at the point of parole, if we look years ahead? If Skibitsky's, in 25 years, Skibitsky will be 62 years old. So I know I've been reading some Canadian case law where, the offender will be maybe 95 years old after 25 years, which is a different discussion. But what if at 25 years the Crown wanted to seek dangerous offender designation?
No, that can't be done. So a dangerous offender application has to be made prior to sentencing. So after the person is convicted of whatever crimes, and then prior to the sentencing, the Crown has to make the application. There's only one very narrow exception to that, in which if the Crown is waiting for further evidence or information, they can indicate that they will be bringing an application, but even that has to happen within 6 months.
You mentioned maximum to a medium security prison facility. Would that have been an example of reviewing his status as a dangerous offender?
No. Any parole decisions or reviews of dangerous offender status, any hearings that need to happen on a regular basis for any given offender are separate from decisions made by the correctional service as to, what level of security that person needs to be in. And it's based not on sentence, but on an assessment of the criminogenic needs and risk factors of the offender.
Finally, without a dangerous offender designation, could a serial killer effectively do their time, and if they're young enough after 25 years, then they return to society without any warning?
Well, it wouldn't be without warning, but yes, it is possible that a person, regardless of whatever crime they were convicted of, could apply for parole after 25 years, and then that parole could be granted. Now, I want to be very clear that in serious cases, and certainly with serial killers, it virtually never happens that the person is released. However, it is theoretically possible that they could be released. But the parole hearings are, people are informed about parole hearings when they happen. So it's not as if there would be all sorts of attention being paid to it. I have no doubt. So it certainly wouldn't be that a notorious serial killer could be released from prison sort of without the public knowing about it.
Thank you very much, Frank, for walking us through this aspect of the law. And to be clear here, this just came out of a question that maybe an average person might have, wondering about that designation. I appreciate you walking us through it.
You're very welcome.
That is Frank Cormier, criminology professor at the University of Manitoba. If you want to read more about the sentence that Skibitsky did receive this week, please go to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Comprehensive coverage there of what happened. It is 2 minutes to 8 o'clock. And speaking of coverage, Matt Humphrey's back.
Good morning. The City of Winnipeg is in the process of renaming Air Canada Window Park along Portage Avenue. It's not far from our building. But one of the people in charge of the renaming, who is calling for name suggestions from the public, says the vast majority of the submissions they've received so far are negative and racist. She says it's discouraging. Many in the public don't seem to support the initiative. We'll hear more about that and all the other news after World Report.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
14, sunny in Winnipeg, high 24. Traffic good. 788-3093 if you see a problem pop up. Coming up after 8 o'clock on CBC, living in a rural community can be tough for kids who are looking for ways to connect. At 8:10, find out how York Landing is tackling isolation with Esports. We'll hear about that and about how it's been growing in one of the local schools. Stay tuned. Right now, though, it's time for World Report and the latest on the national and international news front on CBC. Stay with us.
Today on Q with Tom Power. Dua Lipa is one of the world's great pop stars. In a Canadian exclusive, we met up in New York City to talk about how being the child of refugees shapes her art, why pop music doesn't get the respect it deserves, and how to turn a bad date into a great song.
I feel good and I want to grasp that energy.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Susan Ormiston. The Taliban has brought in new, even stricter rules saying women's voices can't even be heard in public. What 3 Afghans in Canada want the world to do to help those who stayed behind. Coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
We begin with breaking news from New Jersey. Former Calgary Flames player Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew are dead. Police say the pair were cycling on a country road. They were involved in a motor vehicle crash. The driver of an SUV has been arrested and is charged with 2 counts of death by auto. Police say he's suspected of driving under the influence of alcohol. 31-year-old Gaudreau was a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets, but broke into the NHL with Calgary and played 9 seasons with the Flames. Gaudreau, a 7-time All-Star, known in hockey circles by his nickname, Johnny Hockey. Canadians are getting a better reading on the state of the country's economy this morning. Statistics Canada has just released the latest report on gross domestic product. It shows GDP grew at a higher rate than expected in the second quarter. The CBC's Nisha Patel reports.
Canada's economy grew faster than expected in the second quarter. GDP rose 2.1% on an annualized basis from April to June. Government spending was one of the biggest drivers, up 11% year over year. Businesses also invested more, and while surging population growth has been boosting the economy, consumer spending has eased as households continue to feel the pinch of high borrowing costs and years of high inflation. Early data shows that momentum is starting to stall, though, heading into the second half of the year. That, combined with an easing job market and cooling inflation, gives the Bank of Canada enough backing to continue cutting interest rates. The bank started to cut interest rates back in June, but there is a lag. It will take months for rate cuts to have an impact on the economy. Most economists expect the central bank to cut its key interest rate again next week. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Immigration is shaping up to be a major talking point when Parliament resumes next month. Earlier this week, Immigration Minister Mark Miller announced there could be big changes coming to Canada's immigration programs, and the leader of the official opposition is now responding. The CBC's Kate McKenna has been following the issue in Ottawa. Kate, what did Pierre Poilievre say?
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said he'd rein in Canada's population growth if elected, saying growth should be tied to a level below the number of new homes built and capacity to access healthcare and jobs. Yesterday, he took aim at the Liberal record on immigration.
First of all, we have to acknowledge that Justin Trudeau has destroyed our immigration system. We had a multi-generational consensus in immigration for literally decades before Trudeau came along.
This week, Immigration Minister Mark Miller announced a tightening of rules that his own government loosened around the Temporary Foreign Workers Program to prevent the workers from being abused and to make sure that young Canadians are able to access entry-level jobs. He also signaled that this fall could see big tweaks to some of Canada's permanent residency programs. This comes as experts warn that Canada's rapid population growth is putting a major strain on housing stock because there are more people coming to Canada than there are houses being built. As a result, prices are soaring and young people are being priced out. Last year, the immigration minister announced a cap on the international student permits when that program spiked, but temporary immigration numbers are still at a historic high. At the cabinet retreat this week, Miller said that all options are on the table when it comes to looking for solutions. He said we're likely to hear an update in November. It's another sign that immigration is set to be the biggest subject of debate when the House of Commons sits again in September.
Kate McKenna in Ottawa. Thanks, Kate.
You're welcome.
The world already knows what a Trump presidency looks like, and this morning it has a better idea of what a Harris presidency could look like. In her first major interview since securing the Democratic nomination, Kamala Harris spoke about her vision for the United States. The CBC's Katie Simpson reports.
Day one, it's going to be about, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy.
Vice President Kamala Harris says her top priority will be finding ways to ease the cost of living crisis, to grow the middle class, make groceries and housing more affordable. In her first major unscripted appearance, she defended the Biden administration's handling of the economy while acknowledging some Americans are hurting.
To supply American families with their basic needs, I'll say that that's good work. There's more to do.
On foreign policy, she told CNN anchor Dana Bash she'll maintain current U.S. support for Israel, despite objections from a vocal coalition of progressive voters.
But no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth. No, we have to get a deal done.
Harris only took a few swipes at Donald Trump, dismissing his questioning of her mixed-race identity.
Any same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
And for the first time, she shared details about the historic phone call she got from Joe Biden. On the Sunday, he decided he was stepping down. She says she just made her grandnieces pancakes. They were sitting down to do a puzzle when the phone rang and he shared his announcement.
I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. And that's how I learned about it. He was very clear that he was going to support me. My first thought was not about me, to be honest with you. My first thought was about him, to be honest.
There were no major gaffes, which is exactly what the Harris campaign was hoping for. They like the direction the election is headed and have been running an extremely cautious campaign to keep it that way. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
To the Middle East now, and a warning from the UN. A failure to deliver polio vaccines would be disastrous for children not only in Gaza, but beyond. It comes ahead of a planned break in fighting in Gaza on Sunday to allow the World Health Organization to begin a vaccination campaign there. Julia Chapman has the details.
Inside Gaza, more than 1.2 million polio vaccines sit waiting to be used. They're destined for children under the age of 10. Health officials will start administering the vaccines on Sunday if fighting stops in the agreed areas. Louise Wateridge is a UN spokesperson in Gaza.
Any military operations during the time we are trying to roll out a vaccination campaign will affect our ability to deliver these vaccinations to children.
Polio has returned to Gaza after 25 years. The nearly eradicated disease has become resurgent amid mass displacement and poor sanitation. Nafeen Abu al-Jidyan's son Abdul Rahman was the first confirmed case. She told CBC News the 11-month-old has become weak and immobile. Health officials say prevention is key, especially with medical facilities badly damaged and poorly supplied. But moving supplies around the enclave is extremely dangerous. Yesterday, an American NGO carrying medical aid was targeted with an airstrike. Israel says armed assailants were trying to hijack the convoy. The charity says several transport company workers were killed. And earlier this week, Israeli forces shot a clearly marked World Food Programme vehicle. Israel says the incident happened because of a communication error. Julia Chapman, CBC News, London.
One of two doctors charged in connection with Canadian actor Matthew Perry's death is set to appear today in a U.S. federal court in Los Angeles. Dr. Mark Chavez is expected to plead guilty to conspiring to distribute the surgical anesthetic ketamine. Chavez agreed to cooperate with prosecutors as they pursue their main targets, another doctor and a woman nicknamed the Ketamine Queen. Both have pleaded not guilty and are awaiting trial. And finally, a comeback story to touch the hearts of Canadians. Jacob Wasserman is making his Paralympics debut this morning as the lone representative of Team Canada in para-rowing. You may recall, Wasserman was a survivor of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash in 2018. The accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. In October 2022, he tried rowing for the first time, and now he's making his country proud at the Games in Paris. CBC caught up with his wife Madison on the streets of the French capital.
You know, I think Jacob is incredibly determined, and I don't think he's ever going to settle for less than his best, and not the medal, but his best. And so he continues to push towards that every single day.
She says the support they've received has been tremendous.
We truly have a country behind us, and we have his family here with us. His grandparents are back home, so we've been shooting little videos to send to them, and I've got messages from all the boys to send him as well. So we've got so much support behind us. Honestly, it's hard to put into words because we've dreamt about this moment for 2 years, and now here we are.
Madison says Jacob was aiming to take part in the 2028 Games in Los Angeles. It came as quite a surprise when he found out he would be repping the Maple Leaf in the Paris 2024 Paralympic Games. Well, that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca. And you can listen to us live every morning on the CBC News app. Just tap on the local icon. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. Thanks so much for joining us on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, and on YouTube as well. Friday morning, it is 8:10 a.m. and beautiful sunshine out there. It's the last Friday of August, everyone. We'll get into what your long weekend's going to be like in just a moment. This half hour on our program, living in a rural or remote community can be difficult for kids who are looking for ways to connect. We're going to find out this half hour how York Landing has been tackling isolation with video games, but not just that. Esports specifically, and finding a way to have esport presented in education has been a real point of connection for the students there. So stay tuned. We're going to hear more about how all of this came to be. In a moment, news headlines with Matt Humphrey. And here is Matt with the news. Good morning.
Good morning. Most CUPE members representing healthcare support and facility workers have rejected a tentative agreement, which could lead now to a possible strike. 5 out of 6 groups have voted against the deal. The union says its bargaining team will now go back to the table with a strike mandate. We'll hear more details at the bottom of the hour. The CBC has contacted health authorities for response. And the brutal acts of Winnipeg serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky left even the judge who handed him a life sentence calling that punishment inadequate. Now a debate is on over how long people convicted of murdering multiple victims should have to wait before getting a chance to apply for parole. We'll hear more of that conversation at the bottom of the hour.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
Well, here's something I have never done, you guys. I have never gone to the Labor Day Classic in Regina. Anybody?
Me
Anyone
neither.
been to the game?
No.
Me too.
No, don't talk to me or Matt about football. We're not very good at it.
I feel like we should be doing this. Abby, like that'd be a really good trip. The weather is perfect if you want a road trip to Regina to support the Bombers on Sunday.
It's perfect. It's a perfect weather for a road trip to Regina, definitely. And then I'm hoping we come back with a win.
Yeah, me too. It'll be first in the West if they return. All right, so let's get into the forecast for today at least.
It is 15 in Winnipeg now, mainly sunny. The forecast for today, we're going to see the sunshine throughout the day. The winds will be breezy from the west, and then we'll touch a high of 24, though that will be feeling a bit humid. And then for the evening period, we see some cloud rolling, and then that would clear up and some light breeze in the evening. Other regions, we're seeing Thompson at 12 and partly cloudy. That light rain we saw earlier in Churchill has stopped, and now we have more of a foggy condition at 9 degrees, heading to a high of 15. From Brandon all the way down to Morris, we're seeing 12s and 14s and mainly sunny in most of the regions, and we'll see highs hovering near 23 and 24 later in the day. So in summary, it's a sunny and breezy day ahead with clear skies tonight and a mix of sun and clouds expected tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
It's not bad for the long weekend. Sometimes we get rained out or it's, really dreadful, so it's looking not bad. Chloe Friesen, quiet morning in traffic, right?
Yeah, fairly quiet. I did get one call. I was very excited to get a call. Beverly called to say that northbound Waverly, just past Lee, you're down to 1 lane due to construction. It's very slow moving at the moment, northbound Waverly. So stay left to pass. Thank you, Beverly, for that call. And if there's anything else slowing you down, you can let us know by calling 204-788-3093.
Well, back to school is almost here, and the northern Manitoba community of York Landing in York Factory is trying something new to help kids feel more connected. That is because living in any remote community can be very isolating, and it leaves some kids struggling to build healthy relationships. So enter video games and esports. It might sound counterintuitive, but Carl Hildebrandt joins us to explain why it's not. Carl is chair of Manitoba School Esports Association and joins us via Zoom. Hi there.
Hi there.
So tell me a little bit about how esports and video games, are used in schools.
Well, our organization is a not-for-profit, and it's put on by volunteer educators that are really passionate about video games and education. And we offer different seasons throughout the year, different competitions. It typically lasts about 4 weeks and different game titles. And yeah, we connect the schools to this network, and they get to compete together in and have a lot of fun while doing it.
So is it, I know that one of the examples has been George Saunders Memorial School as I've been mentioning, York Landing. So would they have an esports team, or would it be used in the classrooms for different educational moments?
It's extracurricular. So they have an esports team that competes, and most of our games would take place around 4:30 after school and go till about 6 o'clock. So the kids would go home and eat, and then they come back to the school where the consoles are, wherever they're gaming, and compete against other schools across the province.
What's the reaction been as you look at the league?
We find that students are really gravitating toward esports, and we're connecting with those kids that don't normally engage in traditional sports. And that's kind of the missing piece for them at schools. This provides an opportunity for them to connect to an adult at the school, connect with peers that are like-minded in these groups, in these esport groups. And some of them have never competed on a team. All the titles that we put on are all team sports. Depending on the title, it could be 2v2, sometimes 3, sometimes 5. So it all depends on the game title, but these kids are learning communication. They're learning how to collaborate and work as a team. And, we're finding that these are skills that they've never tried before. So it's it's an authentic learning experience for them.
I want to mention as well that we do hope to speak to some of the students as well this fall about how that's been going. I keep mentioning the school in York Landing, but can you tell me a little bit about the network, like the number of teams, and also maybe how you're hoping to grow that this fall, given that you've had some success?
Yeah, for sure. So last year's registration, we saw 53 unique schools that registered for membership with the MSEA, the Manitoba School Esports Association, and York Landing has been a part of us for about 3 years now. And this network is really, for York Landing, it's resounding because they're putting themselves on the map here in Manitoba, where they are an isolated rural community that really struggles to get resources into the community and or opportunities to compete otherwise in traditional sports. They might get 1 or 2 opportunities a year to play hockey or things like that. But the beauty of esports is they can do it all from their community.
What does it mean for equipment and for connectivity? What is your organization had to partner with and fund the schools with around laptops and headsets you were mentioning?
Oh, for sure. This past year, actually, Microsoft had a lawsuit, and they were giving free money to K-12 education. All you had to do was apply for it. The principal had to apply for it from the school. So I think it was based on the distance from an urban center and how big your school is. So they received a grant or voucher, Microsoft voucher, and they purchased about 25 gaming laptops, and that's the plan to utilize this year. Initially, we bought them Nintendo Switches, but they've been around for about 8 years, so we're not condoning schools to really invest in Switches anymore. And then also the kids kind of know right away that they're at a disadvantage on a Switch because the graphics are a little bit less and it's laggy. The frame rates aren't exactly great. So those kids are actually bringing in their own consoles from home to game at school. So it was just a combination of things. But this year moving forward, their plan is to use those gaming laptops.
I have a nephew that competes in esports, so I know a fair bit about it and how much he loves it. If someone has never, delved into this world or looked at it, they might be thinking, they're not sold. How is it? Video games have a bad reputation as well for disconnection, actually, the opposite of what you're talking about. Some people also say they can promote violence. What's your response to that?
Here with esports in Manitoba and what we do at the MSEA is we're trying to bring video games into the light, and we encourage at school competition. So we want kids going to school and competing together and building that community. And what we're finding is that these kids that are into esports and wanting to be there lack that connection at school. So they get that immediate social emotional kind of fix, right? They're getting set up with a peer group that's like-minded. They're getting connected to an adult at the school, and they're participating in a team. And they're like little ambassadors, if you want to say, of their communities when they go and compete virtually against another team in school. And then in that return, it kind of boosts their self-esteem, their confidence, and for kids in York Landing, their pride in their Indigenous identity.
Are the students incorporating their language as well into the esports games? I understand that's been something that's been happening.
We're trying to set up. There's a ton of career pathways that students could engage in aside from competitive gaming. It's like playing hockey or making the NHL rather. It's 1 in a million. To be a competitive gamer takes a lot of focus, a lot of dedication. And not everyone's going to become a competitive gamer. It's just something fun for them to engage in. But at the same time, there are schools in Manitoba that have started streaming clubs. So getting kids that may not really want to compete or maybe aren't interested in that title at the time when it's offered, because we do offer different game titles throughout the season. So they might be interested in shoutcasting or running OBS to do live streams or create graphics and for design. Like, these are all viable career pathways that are already operating in the United States. They're well ahead of us in terms of esports, but are starting to grow here in Canada.
Is it all in English right now, or are there some languages also that might be within the communities? Obviously, not a lot of people do speak English, but there's also secondary, especially Indigenous languages. And right now we're in a moment, right? We just saw the Star Wars film and in Anishinaabe-Moan. I'm just wondering whether or not that's going to make its way into this competition.
That is the plan. Everything's at grassroots right now in Manitoba and especially in York Landing. And they're actually building a separate hub for gaming where they're going to invite the community with those gaming laptops that they purchased. And already in the community, they're doing shoutcasting in Cree for the Winnipeg Jets games. So that was kind of a conversation I had with the local bus driver who was also a parent of a student. He said, hey, could kids do this with the games in Cree? And I said, absolutely. That's the direction we're headed. So certainly that's where we would like to see ourselves in the future.
And I know you said there's a number of different games that are played, but what's the most popular one when you look at how students have been engaging in the league in Manitoba?
Right now, Rocket League is probably one of our most popular ones, and Brawlhalla. Brawlhalla is probably mostly due to its ease of access. Like, all the game titles that we offer, except for Super Smash Brothers, are cross-platform, so meaning you can play them on any type of console, and they're free to download. You don't have to pay for them.
I've just been educated by my director that Rocket League is like soccer with cars.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
And while it sounds pretty easy, it actually, because it's a 3-on-3 game, it takes a lot of strategy and collaboration and thinking. And kids really hone in on that. You know, when they start to realize that they have to operate as a team in Rocket League, that's when they achieve success.
Really love this story and how it's connecting all different students across Manitoba, especially, as we said, in some of those most isolated geographic places. Appreciate having you on with us, Carl. If somebody wants more information about esports or about what you're doing, where might they go?
Come to our website, msca.gg.
Okay, great. Thanks for being with us. Take care.
Thank you.
Via Zoom, that's Carl Hildebrandt, the chair of the Manitoba School Esports Association. You can check out their website for more details, as he said. His team launched an esports program in York Landing this fall.
The CBC Music Top 20. CBC Music Live. All right. Savor the flavor of the Francophone world on C'est Formidable. Experience the next wave of Indigenous music with Reclaim. The global sounds of frequencies. End your day or start your late night with music on CBC Radio 1. Weeknights at 11:30 in Newfoundland, and on demand on CBC Listen.
8:23 a.m. And I just misspoke there just because the esports obviously not starting this fall, continuing this fall in York Landing. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC. It is sunny and 14 in the city, and I hope that I'm not behind the 8 ball with the temperature, because often we do have a change in temperature at 8. One more degree, 15 degrees in Winnipeg. Not much change from early this morning. Well, we have new music dropping today from a Manitoba artist, Madeline Roger. The album's called Nerve, and from it, this is You Don't Think About Me.
I held you standing in the ditch, waiting for you to stop shaking. We picked brown-eyed Susans, I took over driving. It's hard to believe you don't think about me anymore. You don't think about me anymore. Yeah, you don't think about me anymore. waves from your hair while you were drifting to sleep. It's hard to believe you don't think about me anymore. You don't think about me anymore. Yeah, you don't think about me anymore. You were hiding, wouldn't look yourself in the mirror. Had a long list of what you'd change if you could. A different face, a different sense of humor. I stood with you year by year. I couldn't let you disappear. I pointed out every part of you I couldn't live without. It's hard to believe you don't think about me anymore. You don't think about me anymore. Yeah, you don't think about me anymore. You don't think about me anymore. Yeah, you don't think about me anymore. You don't think about me anymore.
That's new music from Manitoba's Madeline Roger, the album dropping today. It's called Nerve, and the tune is You Don't Think About Me. Well, if you are thinking of calling Radio Noon for the call-in today, then Lori Hoogstraten's here to entice you to do so. She, of course, hosting Noon, and between 12:30 and 1, we'll be hitting you up with a question and a special guest. Hi there.
Hi.
So what do you got today?
Well, our question is that old junk of yours actually worth $1 million?
Ooh, I hope so.
Well, don't we all? Mike Hewen, who many of us remember from Mike's General Store, and he used to be on CBC quite often, and the Canadian Antiques Roadshow, is going to be our guest. And we want people to call in just to, talk collectibles, vintage, maybe think twice before putting that pristine Barbie out in the garage sale. And so we're going to do that, talk back and forth, and maybe the hockey cards are collectible, maybe that Coca-Cola sign.
I love this.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's Friday, and it's garage sale season, so, that's what we want to hear. So give us a call, 780-0893, or you can text us at 788-7355.
I love that Mike's the guest because he has such a wealth of knowledge. Of course, that store in St. Vital for years. Right now, his son's taken it over and changed it a little bit. But
right, we talked about that.
We can call then and say to Mike, like, is this worth something, do you think?
Exactly.
Or not? Like, I know it'll be an on-the-fly appraisal, but...
He's good at that.
He is great at that. Great at that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you.
All right, so Mike Hewen and Lori Hoogstraten, 12:30 to 1 this afternoon. Do you have some antiques? Do you have some things you're wondering about in terms of value? Call them. Be part of that live calling conversation between 12:30 and 1 today here on CBC. Or you can leave a message as well. And the way to leave a message right now, if you have a question about an item, is 204-788-3797. So that's the Radio Noon listener line. And we'll pass that along to Lori and Mike. Well, we're coming up to news time at 8:30 here. I want to do thank yous here to the people that work in our current affairs unit at CBC Manitoba on all of our programs. This week, our associate producers, Abby Adeyemi, Chloe Friesen, Issa Kixon, Kalkadan Mulugeta, Sierra Sanders, Chidi Akuma, Jim Agapito, May McKillop, Bruce Layden, Marshall Hodgins, and Dylan Longhurst. Community reporter in our unit is Shanley Vidal as well. We have our hosts in unit, Nadia Kidwai, Faith Fundel, Lori Hoogstraten, who you just heard, and Brittany Greenslade. All have been helping out with Radio Noon. Producer in unit, who's been in an acting role as lead producer, Wendy Parker this week. And then acting for our senior producer of audio this week has been Nellie Gonzalez. So thanks to Nellie and to Wendy for their leadership. YouTube, thanks to Brad Lillies. Brad's done with us. He's been helping out with the YouTube production on the morning show for the last little while. But Travis Peterson, thank you for your work today. You can see shots on YouTube every time I mention names. They're cheering for themselves. I love it. And Leif Larson is also the senior producer of audio here at CBC Manitoba to round out the list. So those are the people that work on all of our programming. So remember, we have local programs in the morning, Radio Noon, and then up to speed from 3 to 6, and your weekend morning show. Right now, it is time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. At 8:30, we're at 12 degrees with an air quality advisory in Thompson, 15 degrees and mainly clear over downtown Winnipeg. Good morning, I'm Matt Humphrey. Most QP members representing healthcare support and facility workers have rejected a tentative agreement, meaning a strike could be imminent. 5 out of the 6 groups have voted against the deal. They are workers under the WRHA, including Riverview Health Centre, Shared Health, and community support workers at Southern Health Santé Sud. QP says they will now return to the bargaining table with a strike mandate. It says no strike date has been set, but it is asking workers to prepare for possible job action. The CBC has asked the health authorities for response. Songs, prayers, and ceremony at the Forks last night marked the end of another chapter in a tragic story. People gathered to pay tribute to the 4 women whose lives were cut short by a serial killer sentenced this week. Advocate Sandra Delaron says ceremonies involving fire, water, and berries are meant to help the victims' families move forward in a positive way.
Acknowledging that loss and the pain and suffering, and being here with community and sharing life and promise and hope, it will help families to take that next step. And absolutely, it's going to be difficult, but they can remember this day.
One of the speakers and singers at last night's memorial was Premier Wab Kinew. He says he'll visit the Prairie Green landfill today to see how the plans to search for 2 of the women's remains is coming along. Meanwhile, victims' rights groups, politicians, and even the judge are saying the sentence given to Jeremy Skibitsky this week isn't enough. The man who killed 4 women will be eligible to apply for parole in 25 years. That's because the 4 life sentences he received must be served concurrently, meaning at the same time. Lisa Kerr is an associate law professor at Queen's University. She says the law previously allowed sentences to be served consecutively. But she says the Supreme Court struck it down because it betrayed Canada's commitment to constitutional rights, human dignity, and rehabilitation.
They understood the stakes here, and they also understood that this does not mean that we can't impose very severe punishment and that we can't incapacitate someone like this and keep them separate from us for the rest of his natural life.
Kerr says the chances of Skibitsky ever being granted parole are, quote, virtually non-existent, end quote. A member of a Winnipeg committee tasked with helping to decolonize public spaces says she's discouraged by the feedback she's been getting. Rihanna McKay is the co-chair of Welcoming Winnipeg. They've been asking the public to help suggest a new name for Air Canada Window Park on Portage Avenue downtown. But McKay says the vast majority of the submissions they've received from Winnipeggers are negative and racist. She says public spaces used by Indigenous people should have names that better reflect them.
It's very meaningful for these members that are within that space because it's going to represent their language, who they are, their own history, and it's just an opportunity to really reflect another side of the voices that are within that area.
McKay says she's disappointed many in the public don't appear to support the work being done by Welcoming Winnipeg. For the 2,500 people who were evacuated from Bunabonabee Cree Nation 2 weeks ago, it's the best news they've had. The province says the wildfire near the northeast community is being held and they can now begin returning home. Chief Richard Hart says people are excited, but he's asking them to be patient. He says unlike the evacuation, which took a few days because dozens at a time were ferried out by military planes, the return flights will be on regular or charter flights.
This is going to be the real challenging part, I think, in terms of people's expectations. They've been waiting for the date that they can return, and now the date has been identified. But the reality is that not everybody can go home on that date, so it's going to be very frustrating for a lot of people over the next 2 weeks.
Hart says essential workers will be the first to go back, and those with health issues who are the first to be evacuated will be among the last to return, because there is still smoke in the area. And a sad story from the NHL this morning. Columbus Blue Jacket Johnny Gaudreau has died. New Jersey police say Gaudreau and his 29-year-old brother Matthew were killed when their bicycles that they were riding were struck by an SUV. The driver of that pickup vehicle is in custody and charged with 2 counts of death by automobile. Gaudreau was a member of the Blue Jackets but broke into the NHL with Calgary and played 9 seasons with the Flames. A 7-time All-Star, Gaudreau was known throughout his career by the nickname Johnny Hockey. Johnny Gaudreau was 31 years old. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks for the week, Marcy.
You as well. That's Matt Humphrey, who's been filling in the last couple of days for Heather Wells. All right, Chloe Friesen, take it away with the commute news.
Not a lot going on. Northbound Waverly past Lee, you're down to 1 lane. That's really slowing things down, says Beverly, who called earlier. So stay left to get around. And just Monday, school zones.
I like this time of year. I
It's
don't know.
exciting. I want to go back to school shopping. I'm not going back to school, but I just want to do it anyways.
We could just go buy pencils together.
Let's go
and
buy
live
pencils.
vicariously through others. All right, Abby, the weather is, as we've been saying, going to cooperate for the long weekend.
Yep,
for the most
sunny
part.
skies and warm temperatures. That's what we'll see. Temperatures would warm up to 24 in Winnipeg and 15 in Churchill. Breezy conditions will be coming across board. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds throughout the day across the province. A chance of showers in some northern region and the eastern areas. Air quality advisory in effect for Thompson. And we're just going to see more like enjoying the sunny day.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching on YouTube this morning and being with us. Appreciate you. And hopefully you'll be tuned in again on Monday. We do have a morning show on Labor Day Monday. Faith Fundell is going to be filling in for me. Thank you, Faith. And we hope you can tune in then. Take care. Be well. Enjoy your long weekend if you have one as well. It is coming up on 8:37 and The Current is next right here on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa.